Chapter 452. Ji Nan had actually dared to make the first move. Facing 1 level 10 and 4 level 9 enemies, Ji Nan did not hesitate to attack. Furthermore, his first move was an absolute killing move. This was probably the first time Ji Nan had used his full strength since reaching the level 8 realm. Even when he had killed Shi Yayin, he had hidden in the shadows and launched a sneak attack, easily killing the level 9 Star-Lord. However, it was different this time. He wanted to kill at least 2 level 9 gods while facing unimaginably powerful enemies. Therefore, Ji Nan's first move was a thunderous strike, the law of shadows fully erupting, enveloping one of the enemies within it. Following that, he engaged in close combat. That god had never seen such a scene before. He wanted to use his laws to resist Ji Nan's punches and kicks, but he did not expect to be shattered so easily. Even Fang Chaoyun's words could be shattered by Ji Nan, so it was indeed not difficult for his physical body to break through laws. When that god suffered 2 punches, his divine body instantly cracked, and he wanted to turn and distance himself. The law of shadows enveloping him finally came into effect. Purely in terms of laws, it was not very realistic for a level 8 to fight a level 9 god, even for Ji Nan, especially when he was being attacked from the outside. Therefore, his law of shadows shattered almost immediately. However, Ji Nan had already achieved his goal. He had used his laws to block his opponent for an instant, and that instant was enough for him to deliver a fatal blow. A heavy punch landed on the enemy's chest, shattering the heart in his divine body. At the same time, the attacks from the other enemies landed on Ji Nan. A bone spear formed in front of the skeleton sage, which directly pierced through Ji Nan's abdomen, leaving a huge wound on his body. However, Ji Nan did not care about these attacks. He did not even care about the wound on his body, only continuing to pursue the people in front of him. One punch, another punch. Ji Nan's fists rained down, and in the blink of an eye, he had thrown out dozens of punches, killing a level 9 god. His body had been pierced by the bone spear and had also been hit by the attacks of the other 3. His body was already riddled with holes. The demonic flames were still burning. They had even entered Ji Nan's body through his wounds and ignited his internal organs. Ji Nan had succeeded in killing a level 9 deity, but the price he had paid was that he was heavily injured and on the verge of death. If it was an ordinary person, they probably wouldn't even have the strength to move. However, Ji Nan's gaze remained cold. He slowly turned his head and looked at the skeleton sage and the others who were still alive. His gaze was cold. For some reason, even though they still had the upper hand, the gods felt like they were being targeted by a hunter. Stephen said in a deep voice, "Everyone, spread out. Don't give him a chance to get close to you. All of his strength is focused on close combat." Having personally seen Ji Nan in action, the skeleton sage finally understood the characteristics of the enemy. The gods moved extremely quickly. Some directly escaped into alternate dimensions, while others added a layer of laws to ensure their own safety. Only Stephen himself stood in front of Ji Nan. As a level 10 god, he was not afraid of such a situation. Another bone spear came flying. This time, Ji Nan did not hold it back. His body instantly turned into a shadow and actually split into 3, charging at the 3 gods at the same time. The 3 level 9 gods had learned their lesson this time. Relying on the spatial barrier, they disappeared once again before Ji Nan could get close. Instead, as Ji Nan entered and exited the dimension, he was hit by 2 more bone spears. In response, Ji Nan only smiled coldly. He no longer looked at these people and turned to pounce at Fire Tillen. This was the frontline command center of the Pantheon world. Not good. One of the level 9 gods could not help but appear to stop him. It was most likely that some important person had stayed behind in Fire Tillen and could not sit and watch as Ji Nan acted recklessly. Reality had proven that only those who could emerge victorious in a head-on battle would have the final say. The moment that person appeared, Ji Nan's target changed, and he once again displayed his unimaginable speed. Thus, a scene no different from before appeared. Ji Nan grabbed a god's hammer and allowed all sorts of attacks to hit him. He clearly looked like he should have died long ago, but he was still able to unleash incomparably ferocious attacks. He was well versed in the art of group fighting. No matter how many people you had to face, you just had to grab hold of one and beat him to death. The god was also prepared. He activated the power of his laws at full force in an attempt to force Ji-Yunan away while he himself headed for Fire Till-Len. However, Ji-Yunan had even planned to take the skeleton sage's attacks head-on. Why would he care about him? In a short moment, Ji-Yunan had another dead soul under his hands. However, the price was that more than half of his body had been destroyed. Of his 4 limbs, only one arm was still able to move. Stephen's expression was ice-cold, but he was speechless in his heart. He had never seen an opponent fight like this. He was completely risking his life to kill. Why was this necessary? Meanwhile, Ji-Yunan finally revealed a satisfied smile after risking his life to kill 2 rank 9 gods. His broken body fell towards Fire Till-Len. The 3 people led by the skeleton sage only dared to attack from several layers of space. They did not dare to get close to him at all. Only when Ji-Yunan had completely fallen did Stephen say with a sullen expression, "All gods, retreat from Fire Till-Len. Search for Ji-Yunan's whereabouts. I want to see his corpse." In the current All Heavens, the war between the 2 worlds was undoubtedly the most important matter. Any news related to it would become a hot topic. And at this critical moment, an earth-shattering piece of news spread throughout the All Heavens in the blink of an eye. Shi Daotian had dispatched a team of 4 high-level Star-Lords, a true elite assassination squad, and had successfully killed the demon lord Alfra. Who was this demon lord? Under Shi Daotian's propaganda, bringing the demon necromancer to the battlefield had become Alfred's most important achievement. Killing him had undoubtedly greatly boosted the All Heavens' morale. As the details of the entire assassination operation were gradually revealed to the world, the existence of one person immediately attracted everyone's attention. Ji-Yunan? Why would Ji-Yunan appear there? Why would he participate in this war, and even decisively stay behind to bring up the rear? As for the others, this was illogical. Not only did this not conform to people's understanding of Ji-Yunan, but it also did not conform to Ji-Yunan's position and position. He was a core member of the Heavenly God Society, someone who had always been selfish and unscrupulous. Why would he do such a thing? Shi Daotian's side didn't give any explanation, so a rumor that seemed to make sense started to spread. Shi Daotian must have grasped something that could be used against Ji-Yunan, perhaps even something related to his lifeline. That was why Ji-Yunan had no choice but to secretly change sides. And Ji-Yunan's final decision to stay behind to bring up the rear could also be explained by this. Almost everyone believed this explanation. The only thing that was debating was what exactly could be used against Ji-Yunan, and whether he was already dead. Even Fang Chaoyun was doubtful and called Lin Huan over. "Do you have something that can be used against Ji-Yunan?" Lin Huan could not help but smile bitterly. How could this disciple have the ability to do so? If we're talking about something that can be used against us, it would be that he secretly helped us, but there was no need for him to personally bring up the rear. Chapter 453. Even the higher-ups of Shi Daotian who knew the inside story didn't know what Ji-Yunan wanted to do, let alone the outside world. To the outside world, it was more interesting to guess why Ji-Yunan had been threatened by Shi Daotian and ended up in a situation where no one knew whether he was dead or alive. That's right. The end result of this storm was that Ji-Yunan had risked his life to stop the high-level gods and killed 2 level 9 gods all by himself. Afterward, he had been seriously injured, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. Even though Ji-Yunan's astral world hadn't changed, the gods were still searching for him in Fertilin, which was enough to prove that Ji-Yunan hadn't been found yet. Some people believed that Ji-Yunan was already dead and that the astral world was only temporarily in its current state. They believed that Ji-Yunan, a super genius who had ascended to the world rank in less than 100 years, was like many other geniuses in history, a short-lived blooming cactus that would quickly fall. Some people also believed that Ji-Yunan hadn't really died. Instead, after this incident, he would no longer be suppressed by Shi Daotian. At the same time, he would take this opportunity to withdraw from this battle and the battle between the Heavenly Deity Society and Shi Daotian. Perhaps it would be several hundred years, or perhaps it would be several thousand years. In any case, When Ji Nan appeared in front of people again, he would stand at a completely new height. There were many speculations about Ji Nan, but no one could come up with a unified answer. The Heavenly Deity Society was also puzzled. Whether it was the core members or ordinary members, they all wanted to know what had happened to Ji Nan that had forced him to attack Alfred. Zhuangxian came to the extreme sword heaven immediately. Even though he didn't want to disturb Shui Ren, this matter was too big for him to handle. He had to ask Shui Ren for help. However, when Zhuangxian arrived at the extreme sword heaven, he saw an unexpected person. "You're here." An old man with white hair and wrinkles was sitting on an old wooden armchair, looking at Zhuangxian with a smile. There was only one person left who could predict Zhuangxian's arrival and enter the extreme sword heaven at will: Elder Zi Luo, the 14th Dao integration cultivator in the all heavens. Zhuangxian was stunned and hurriedly bowed. "Mr. Shui Ren has reached a critical stage. It's not convenient for him to come out for the time being." Old man Zi Luo explained softly, and then gradually became serious. "About Ji Nan, I already know." Zhuangxian said, "After this happened, I used all methods to investigate, but I didn't find that Ji Nan contacted Shi Daotian before the battle." "You won't be able to find anything." Old man Zi Luo shook his head lightly. If Ji Nan really had something on the other side, then the person who went to see him definitely wouldn't have been discovered by you. A hint of understanding flashed across Zhuangxian's eyes. "You mean, that person will appear personally?" Now that the Heavenly Deity Assembly's influence had spread throughout the all heavens, Song Fei was the only one who hadn't left any traces behind. Elder Zi Luo nodded. "Moreover, it was definitely before the battle. Once the war starts, Song Fei won't have the energy to pay attention to these things. Don't think that just because these battles were between mortals, they had nothing to do with Dao integration stage beings. In reality, both sides were facing off against one another in a certain corner, and these Dao integration stage mighty figures definitely wouldn't mind attacking either side if a single opening appeared. As long as they had the time to attack, the celestial lords and deities below would be in big trouble." Zhuangxian frowned as he pondered, gradually sorting out the entire chain of thought. In other words, before the battle started, Song Fei discovered something on Senior Ji Nan, so he asked him to help during the battle. It's just that Senior Ji Nan didn't reveal his identity until Shi Daotian felt that he was no longer of any value, so he targeted Alfred and used him one last time. A piece of information suddenly flashed across Zhuangxian's mind, and he said with sudden realization, "No wonder there was news from the front lines that there was a spectre who specialized in killing deities but didn't take their guardhoods. That must be Senior Ji Nan." This series of analysis was closely linked, and with the current information, this was indeed the closest answer to the truth. A look of pity appeared on Elder Zi Luo's face, and he said, "Ji Nan, it's a pity. If there's anything on him, his origins have always been a mystery, and it's most likely because of this." Many people knew that Ji Nan was very familiar with the world of gods, and that he was very likely the reincarnation of some important person there. However, who exactly he was had always been a mystery. Song Fei had personally gone to the world of gods before, and it was very possible that he had discovered Ji Nan's background in the process. Zhuangxian nodded with a solemn expression. "I'll continue investigating in this direction." Elder Zi Luo and Zhuangxian's guesses were slightly off, and the others were even more off. Lu Wen knew very little about Ji Nan, and because he was not involved, he did not even have the mood to investigate. He was busy paying attention to another matter. On his desk, the reports clearly showed that there was a group of people playing the role of battlefield specters, hunting lone deities on the battlefield. They were different from Ji Nan, who only killed people without digging out their divinities. Not only did they kill people without digging out their divinities, they would also send out a team to the target's god kingdom to collect faith. Yes, the purpose of this group of people hunting gods was actually for the faith energy in the god kingdom. Once a god died, the faith of the believers in the god kingdom would undoubtedly collapse in an instant. Hence, the wandering faith energy became their best prey. Others might not know what this group of people were doing, but Lu Wen knew very well. The power of faith and the power of dreams are both branches of the power of thought, and are two sides of the same coin. Lu Wen put down the scroll and said softly, Dream immortal, you've indeed tricked everyone. While the entire world of gods was discussing Ji Yunan, this fellow, who was rumored to be dead or alive, was leisurely hiding in a small world, basking in the rare sunlight here. Ji Yunan did not know what world this was, and only knew that there was only sunlight for 6 hours a day. Of course, this was not the main point. The main point was that he had come here to recuperate from his injuries. Even with Ji Yunan's heretic god body, he had overdrawn himself by forcefully withstanding the continuous attacks of a level 10 and several level 9s. He needed to recuperate continuously. It was only now, after more than half a month, that he could be considered to have fully recovered. Fortunately, the uniqueness of the law of shadows had allowed him to escape from Fel Tiran and not be trapped to death in the world of gods. With this huge influx of sin points, Ji Yunan's sin points finally exceeded 130,000, reaching the standard of a level 10. The current Ji Yunan did not dare to appear in front of the overgods at all, lest his true nature as a heretic god would be exposed. What he needed to do now was, of course, to truly ascend to level 10 as soon as possible. Currently, Ji Yunan was only 1.5 sect worlds worth of points away from level 10. That group of people should have more or less guessed it by now. Well then, let's do it. Ji Yunan's lips curled into a faint smile, and he sent a message to the God Kingdom. Chapter 454. No one had expected that after disappearing for just half a month, the most popular student Ji Yunan would reappear, and make another big move. He was attacking the magnificent Emperor Heaven. The army that covered the sky seemed to have been prepared for a long time, descending on the magnificent Emperor Heaven in an orderly fashion and starting the massacre immediately. But this news was not discovered immediately, because Ji Yunan's army did not descend openly, but secretly infiltrated. As it turned out, the magnificent Emperor Heaven had been in turmoil recently, heroes rising up together. Every faction had Ji Yunan's shadow behind them, and his army had long infiltrated the magnificent Emperor Heaven. Only when the Divine Nation War erupted did they secretly infiltrate the magnificent Emperor Heaven under the guise of helping the various factions. By the time the Grand Sage Celestial Empress discovered all this, the massacre was already more than half over. The entire magnificent Emperor Heaven was plunged into misery, the people had no way to live, and 9 out of 10 houses were empty. Why? The Grand Sage Celestial Empress stood in her own palace, looking coldly ahead. Ji Yunan was standing there calmly. Ever since she discovered something was wrong, Ji Yunan had already appeared, clearly prepared. Ji Yunan sighed lightly and shook his head. I was forced by others. Ji Yunan's attack on the magnificent Emperor Heaven was something all heavens were paying attention to, and his words immediately caused a commotion. Shi Daotian's methods are indeed extraordinary. First, he used Ji Yunan as cannon fodder to send himself to death, then forced him to attack the magnificent Emperor Heaven instead. His forcing him to fall out with the Heavenly Gods Union. That old man Fang Chaoyun said he wanted to join the Heavenly Gods Union, then used such methods in the blink of an eye. Really, TSK. Old man Fang is really narrow-minded. His personal grudge with Ji Yunan actually escalated to this extent. Discussions arose everywhere. While people were discussing what dirt Ji Yunan had on him, they were also discussing Fang Chaoyun's disdain. Shi Daotian naturally received the news at the first instant. I was forced by someone. What a good excuse. Fang Chaoyun was about to break the pen in his hand, the fury in his heart reaching the limit. At this point, how could he not know Ji Yunan's goal? They were clearly trying to smear Shi Daotian's name. If not for the many things that had happened before, no one would have interpreted Ji Yunan's words in depth, and they might even have suspected his own intentions. But with the foreshadowing of the Demon Lord incident and the many previous discussions, Ji Yunan threw out this sentence. Even if he didn't mention names, the spearhead was undoubtedly pointed at Shi Daotian and Fang Chaoyun. With the previous impression, no one doubted the truth of Ji Yunan's words, because Ji Yunan's attitude coincided with their guesses. Master, this must be the Heaven God Society's ruse. Lin Huan anxiously rushed to Fang Chaoyun's study. The most important thing now is to stop Ji Yunan from doing anything. We have to show our attitude. Lin Huan felt that he had completely understood. This was simply a play put on by the Divine Deity Society and Ji Yunan, and it was precisely a counterattack to his master's application to join the society. In this play, Ji Yunan was only a chess piece in charge of the performance. The mastermind behind the scenes of the Divine Deity Society was the truly terrifying one. Why should we stop him? Fang Chaoyun coldly harumphed. Those who are innocent will be innocent. We didn't do such a thing. When your grandmaster returns, the truth will naturally be revealed. Lin Huan was stunned. He didn't expect this old man to be so stubborn. Master, there is no need to say any more. Fang Chaoyun waved his hand. Moreover, is there any use in clarifying such a matter? The current plan is to suppress the situation with silence. Shi Daotian adopted the strategy of suppress the situation with silence. Thus, he didn't respond to the entire Ji Yunan incident, and resolutely maintained a cold attitude. This tacit agreement caused the mockery from all sides to become even louder, but that was all. After all, they couldn't really do anything to Shi Daotian. Instead, the battle continued in an orderly manner. The battle on Ji Yunan's side was also ongoing. The Divine Servant Army had split into many groups and entered the magnificent Emperor Heaven in advance. This was to cause a large number of casualties at the first moment and earn points for Ji Yunan. At the same time, it was to weaken the Grand Sage Immortal Empress power. The laws of the magnificent Emperor Heaven were special. The power that a Star Master could obtain was mainly manifested through Dragon Qi. Thus, when the Celestial Empire was continuously pushed back by the Divine Servant Army, the Grand Sage Immortal Empress power was continuously weakening. Originally, with her level, she could easily suppress Ji Yunan in her own astral world. However, with the current situation, it actually allowed Ji Yunan to temporarily stabilize the situation. You won't be able to delay for long, the Grand Sage Immortal Empress said gloomily as she looked coldly at Ji Yunan. She didn't care what reason Ji Yunan had. From the moment the latter invaded the magnificent Emperor Heaven, the two of them were enemies that wouldn't rest until one of them was dead. Every movement of hers contained a terrifying might. The power of heaven and earth flowed towards Ji Yunan alone. It was as if he was fighting against the entire world. After all, the Grand Sage Immortal Empress was a veteran expert. Even if she couldn't compare to Fang Chaoyun, she wouldn't be too far off. She didn't even care about the armies in the astral world. She just wanted to crush Ji Yunan in one go. Even if her Dragon Qi was continuously decreasing, she was still confident that she could crush Ji Yunan in a short period of time. And the reality was as such. If there were no other variables, Ji Yunan definitely wouldn't be able to hold on for long. However, Ji Yunan was still doing his best to hold on. Because the current situation was already much better than what he had expected. With Shi Daotian's help, at least the Heavenly God Society was still hesitating. They didn't collectively help the magnificent Emperor Heaven. Thus, Ji Yunan was waiting. He already had enough sin points to ascend to the 10th level. He still needed quite a bit of points. After slaughtering more than half of the magnificent Emperor Heaven, he might be able to reach the target. However, this didn't mean that he had to hold on until then. He could definitely collect enough points and return to the Divine Nation to advance. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress pressure continued, but because of Ji Yunan's arrangements, the efficiency of invading the Divine Nation was much higher than expected. While Ji Yunan was enduring the spiritual pressure of heaven and earth, he was also paying attention to the points on the interface. 50,000, 30,000, 10,000. The last 5,000. Success. At the same time that his points reached the 9th level, Ji Yunan's figure shrank. His entire body turned into a shadow and quickly disappeared. He ran away. At least he knows what's good for him, the Grand Sage Immortal Empress sneered. She didn't have many doubts. She had originally thought that Ji Yunan had some special trump card to rely on. Now, it seemed that he just had the upper hand. With the difference in strength between the two sides, if Ji Yunan still didn't leave, he would soon die from the omnipresent pressure. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress obviously knew of Ji Yunan's terrifying regenerative ability. However, every ability in this world had a way to restrain it, and Ji Yunan was no exception. She used the pressure of heaven and earth. When the pressure reached a certain point, Ji Yunan's body would instantly collapse. This undoubtedly had the effect of restraining him. She didn't stay any longer. She immediately descended to the mortal realm and personally cleaned up Ji Yunan's army. What puzzled her was that these troops didn't seem to have any intention of retreating. Instead, they attacked everywhere without any regard for their lives, hoping to cause more casualties. And in a place she couldn't see, Ji Yunan had already returned to the divine nation. With the fastest speed in his life, he opened the interface and quickly selected a building, building it outside the evil divine palace. Hurry! Hurry! Quick! Ji Yunan's mind operated at lightning speed, unwilling to waste even a single second. One had to know that the divine nation war was still ongoing. Every second, countless divine servants died at the hands of the grand sage immortal empress. Right now, time was points. Under Ji Yunan's crazy efforts, all the buildings were built at the fastest speed possible. He then unhesitatingly pressed the advancement button. Chapter 455. How powerful would a Tier 9 Ji Yunan be? Whether it was a god or a Star Lord, to existences who were used to the original system of power, Ji Yunan was like an extra level that had appeared out of nowhere. There was originally an insurmountable gap between the Dao integration realm and the Dao integration realm, but Ji Yunan was slowly bridging this gap. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress, who had thought that Ji Yunan had already retreated, felt an indescribable sense of danger when she began to clean up the army of divine servants and quickly pacify the internal strife in the magnificent royal heaven. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress had also gone through layers of schemes and battles to finally stand in her current position. She had never lost her vigilance, so she reacted immediately. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress body suddenly shifted to the side, and the terrifying power that suppressed the world appeared once more. Only then did a figure slowly appear where she had originally been. Ji Yunan. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress looked over in shock. She was surprised that Ji Yunan had returned, and even more surprised by the power he had displayed. Bang! Ji Yunan suddenly punched out. His speed was inconceivably fast as he pounced towards the Grand Sage Immortal Empress. However, he struck a barrier in front of her, producing a dull sound. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress was still in a state of lingering fear, and her forehead was already covered in cold sweat. She rejoiced that she was in the magnificent royal heaven, and that she could freeze the world with a single thought. In terms of the influence of laws on the world, the Grand Sage Immortal Empress' ability to freeze the world was definitely one of the best. However, Ji Yunan revealed a cold smile, and without saying a word, he punched out again. Bang! The terrifying power shocked the Grand Sage Immortal Empress. The barrier that froze the world was struck, and she could even faintly feel a tremor, as if the entire world was trembling. How, with another punch, the Grand Sage Immortal Empress felt her entire body sway. Perhaps this empress had never experienced an earthquake before, but she had now experienced it. However, she had no time to care about this. She only wanted to know how Ji Yunan's power had suddenly increased by so much. A secret technique? A special magic treasure? A gift from a fusing Dao? Countless possibilities flashed through the Grand Sage Immortal Empress's mind, but none of them matched the situation in front of her, until she wanted to escape and dodge upwards. Ji Yunan took a step forward and instantly turned into a shadow. In the blink of an eye, he appeared above his opponent and sent her flying back with a vicious punch. It was also this step that allowed the Grand Sage Immortal Empress to finally see Ji Yunan's laws. Heaven tier! The Empress blurted out, her face filled with shock and despair. A Star Master who had just advanced to world level not long ago, and then advanced again in just a few years, stepping into the ranks of heaven level in one go. Was this possible? This completely defied common sense. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress looked at Ji Yunan like she was looking at a demon. This was no longer a question of whether he was a genius or not. It was impossible for such a thing to happen. Where was he going to accumulate the resources of the astral boundary? Where was he going to recruit experts for the astral boundary? The comprehension of laws could be said to be perception, but how could these things be accomplished in one go? The advancement of an astral boundary had to be done step by step. There was no such thing as reaching the heavens in one go. However, Ji Yunan had done it, so the Grand Sage Immortal Empress found it hard to understand. Just as her mind was in turmoil, her control over the laws of heaven and earth seemed to weaken a little. Ji Yunan was such a sharp person that he instantly grasped this gap, and the shadow sword abruptly cut in. Poochie. The sword pierced through the Grand Sage Immortal Empress's chest. The pain that she hadn't experienced in a long time caused her to truly wake up. After all, she was someone who had stood out from over 100 successors and was the one who ultimately controlled a large astral boundary. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress's decisive reaction made even Ji Yunan sigh. Without thinking, she stood up. The aura of the laws of heaven and earth suddenly exploded. She had actually detonated the power of the astral boundary. The terrifying explosion directly sent Ji Yunan flying. He instantly lost control of the Grand Sage Immortal Empress, giving the latter a chance to escape. Seeing that things couldn't be done, the Grand Sage Immortal Empress actually abandoned her astral boundary just to fight for a way out. Such boldness was probably rare even for men. Quite decisive. Seeing that it would be difficult to find any traces of the Grand Sage Immortal Empress, Ji Yunan decided not to chase after her. The most important thing now was to harvest points. In this Divine Nations war, Ji Yunan had given the order to kill with all your might, regardless of the casualties. Therefore, even though the harvesting efficiency was extremely high, the losses were also quite heavy. There was no need to talk about the divine servants that were created entirely from points. Even the god envoys, under such an order, were constantly losing members. More than half of Ji Yunan's player army had already been injured. If not for the fact that these people could be revived, Ji Yunan's previous actions would have been for naught. Of course, even if he really lost all of his player army, Ji Yunan would still not blink an eye. After harvesting this wave of points, Ji Yunan had already achieved all of his goals. He only needed to wait for his return to the Divine Nations to advance to the 10th step, and then he could start preparing for the second transition. At that time, he would be able to fly as high as the sky, completely ignoring the Divine Nations or not. In any case, everything would have to wait until after the second transition. Before and after the second transition were two completely different worlds. The entire first transition stage revolved around the Divine Nations gameplay, but once they completed the second transition, the players would return to the gameplay that revolved around themselves. Of course, there were also people who played in the Divine Nations stage for their entire lives, unable to extricate themselves from it. However, Ji Yunan was clearly not such a person. Ji Yunan sat in the magnificent Emperor Heaven, watching as the Divine Servant Army slaughtered everywhere, and then immediately issued an order. Lady Shauna, it's all thanks to you this time. Within the Imperial City, a handsome young man thanked Shauna sincerely. This time, the alliance of the 18 feudal vassals had come together to suppress the muddle-headed royal family and purge the emperor's side. They had agreed that whoever attacked the Imperial City first would be the one to defend the country and monopolize the Central Plains. General Zhong, you're too kind. Shauna looked like she was well versed in all the worlds, and it was impossible to tell that she had grown up in the world of gods. This young General Zhong exchanged a few more words with Shauna, and then prepared to lead his men into the Imperial Palace, inviting Shauna along as well. General Zhong undoubtedly had a very good impression of this powerful woman who seemed to have descended from the heavens to help him wholeheartedly. In his heart, he had long decided that when the world was settled, he would definitely marry her as his empress. Lady Shauna, I wonder if you're willing to follow me into the Imperial Palace? General Zhong asked with a smile. Shauna smiled non-committally. Just as she was about to speak, her expression changed slightly, and then she continued smiling. General Zhong, I don't think that's necessary. Before General Zhong could understand what she meant, Shauna calmly said to someone behind her, do it. The next moment, Shauna's left hand instantly turned into a red light, and pierced through General Zhong's abdomen. Chapter 456. Read. First destroy the Grand Sage Immortal Empress's empire, then use the hidden armies to instantly attack their allies, harvesting points with the highest efficiency. This was the strategy that Ji Yunan had decided on long ago, and now he was just executing it perfectly. And because the empire occupied the majority of the magnificent Emperor Heaven's forces, Ji Yunan's harvesting mission was already more than half complete, and all that was left was to wrap things up. His points were accumulating at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the 10th level was already right in front of him. All that was left was to kill these remnants. Amen, and take revenge for the Grand Sage Immortal Empress. We're all members of the Heavenly God Society, there's no need to be polite. Ji Nan said silently in his heart, and at this moment, a figure slowly appeared in front of him. With Ji Nan's current cultivation realm, there was only one possibility in all the heavens for someone to be able to appear so easily without being detected by him beforehand, a Dao integration cultivator. I didn't think that you'd be the first to arrive. Ji Nan curled his lips, looking at the person who had appeared. Whether it was Elder Zi Luo coming for the Heavenly God Society, or Song Fei coming for his master, Ji Nan would not find it strange, even though both of them should not be free at the moment. But neither of them had appeared, and the first to arrive was Lu Wen. I also didn't expect this. Lu Wen laughed, so you really aren't human. After his sin value had reached the 10th level, and his own cultivation had also reached the 9th level, the aura of the heretic god on Ji Nan's body could no longer be concealed. Ordinary people might not be able to discover it, but in the eyes of a Dao integration expert like Lu Wen, the mysteriousness in the depths of Ji Nan's soul was definitely not something that a human could possess. Ji Nan said non-committally, "You're here to ask about Duan Wunch's whereabouts." Lu Wen shook his head, "I know that you won't tell me even if I ask. Since he's already in your hands, then so be it." But then he said, "Someone's coming back. If you can escape with your life, you can come at the right time, a life for a life." With that, Lu Wen's figure instantly disappeared, not giving Ji Nan a chance to speak. On the other hand, Ji Nan looked strangely in the direction he left. He had originally intended to return old Duan back when Lu Wen opened his mouth and asked about it. In any case, he had already been locked up for several years, and the resentment from back then had already been vented. There was no point in keeping him around, and he had even taken up the position of the Divine Kingdom's Pearl for no reason. Therefore, Ji Nan couldn't help but shake his head. "You're so young, why are you pretending?" Perhaps it was because Lu Wen had already become the representative, or perhaps they were busy with other matters, but no second Dao integration stage cultivator appeared. Finally, Ji Nan managed to collect enough points. It's finally done. Ji Nan could not help but heave a sigh of relief. He sat quietly in the evil divine palace and methodically built the buildings. Ji Nan had never stopped to rest since he advanced to the 8th grade and decided to soar into the sky with a single step. It was even more tiring than staying up all night to complete a super long chain mission in his previous life. He had instigated a war between the two worlds and personally hunted down gods. In the end, he had seized the opportunity to slander Shi Daotian and attack the magnificent Emperor Heaven. Only then had he fulfilled the conditions for ascension. As the buildings were upgraded and completed one after another, the advance button on Ji Nan's interface finally lit up again. Ji Nan did not hesitate and decisively chose to advance. Thus, the evil divine palace expanded once again, and the area it occupied reached a massive number. The top of the evil divine palace also started to emit a faint light. Under the gazes of countless people, a brand new building started to appear. The second level of the evil divine palace. However, Ji Nan was not surprised by this. After all, he had already lost track of how many cycles it would take for him to reach this stage. The method to complete the second-class advancement was indeed related to the second level of the evil divine palace. However, he could not rush to complete the second-class advancement. There were still some conditions that had to be fulfilled. Previously, when he was not powerful enough, Ji Nan could only lie low and wait. Now, it was time for him to make a move. "Teacher, someone has entered the Divine Kingdom." Yang Xiaoxiao's voice sounded beside him, and a petite figure in a white dress once again appeared before Ji Nan. As Ji Nan's level rose, the level of the Divine Kingdom was also changing rapidly. However, this change would not happen overnight. It needed time to accumulate. "Who is it?" Yang Xiaoxiao specially appeared to remind Ji Nan. He was not in a hurry to check it out and asked directly. Yang Xiaoxiao tapped lightly with her finger, and a light screen appeared before Ji Nan. A figure appeared on it. It was Fang Chaoyun's disciple, Lin Huan. It was clear that Yang Xiaoxiao had only recently learned such a sci-fi method. Do we expel him? Yang Xiaoxiao asked softly. He seems to be very angry and wants to reason with teacher. Ji Yunan gave it some thought and said, it's too troublesome. Kill him. He's useless now. I want to see Ji Yunan. Lin Huan sat in a side hall of the Divine Kingdom and said to Red Tail with a straight face, he dared to splash dirty water on our heads. Does he not dare to come out and confront me? Red Tail was very experienced in dealing with such situations. He said nonchalantly, I've already sent someone to report this to Lord. Young Master Lin, please wait patiently. Lin Huan sat on a chair with a gloomy face, but he kept a cold smile on his face. Ji Yunan and the Heavenly God Society only know how to play tricks. When the battle is over and Grandmaster returns, there will be plenty of time to settle the score with you. Red Tail, on the other hand, was still smiling. He did not take it to heart at all. He chatted with him casually. Lin Huan saw that he could not scare Red Tail, so he did not say anything and sat there with a straight face. He had come to use Shi Daotian's power to pressure people and force Ji Yunan to clarify the truth. Lin Huan was not worried about his own safety. Even someone like Shui Ren would not dare to kill Shi Daotian's disciple for no reason. Ji Yunan's status in the Heavenly God Society was not as high as Shui Ren's. After a while, Yang Xiaoxiao's figure suddenly appeared and landed beside Red Tail. Before Red Tail could speak, Yang Xiaoxiao smiled at Lin Huan and said, Teacher ordered me to send him on his way. Lin Huan did not have time to react. He only felt a strange chill in his heart and a warm feeling came from his neck. Blood spurted out of his carotid artery. It looked as if Lin Huan's blood pressure had risen and exploded his carotid artery. When Lin Huan's corpse fell to the ground, Red Tail said slowly, in that case, Sir is no longer afraid of that person? Could it be? Yang Xiaoxiao shook her head lightly. Teacher has not taken that step. However, his current realm is indeed unprecedented. Shi Daotian. Fang Chaoyun was still handling the matters of the battle. Every day, a large amount of information came from the front lines, waiting for him to deal with it. Until a disciple stumbled in and cried, Master, Teacher. Senior brother Lin's soul lamp has been extinguished. Catcher. Chapter 457. Read. The 10th level was a completely different experience from before. At this moment, Ji Yunan's sin points, and corresponding realm were all solid 10th level. He had already begun to emit the unique aura of an evil god. What exactly was the aura of an evil god? It was something that was difficult to accurately describe. It could roughly be understood as having a rather obvious difference from a normal god. It was like a robot and a human. Even if they could look exactly the same on the outside, humans would always be able to see the differences within. This difference might be reflected in the details, but when they were combined, the person involved would have a strong feeling, this guy was not the same as me. Red Tail had this feeling now. She came to report the detailed statistics of the magnificent heaven battle to Ji Yunan, but when she saw Ji Yunan sitting high on the throne, she felt a little strange. Ji Yunan was clearly sitting in front of her normally, but she felt that he was very abstract. It was as if his entire body was distorted and terrifying, as if he could turn into a monster at any time. Just standing in front of Ji Yunan, Red Tail was actually a little speechless. Ji Yunan only smiled calmly. Of course, he understood the reason for this situation. Players in the game had always been like this after they reached the high level. Especially after they reached the second-class advancement, the evil god's aura would uncontrollably leak out. Yang Xiaoxiao, who had seen Ji Yunan before, was, after all, already the spirit of the world, so she did not feel this too clearly. Red Tail was the first normal living being to see the 10th level Ji Yunan. Other Dao integration practitioners would actually be in a similar situation, because Dao integration practitioners were already considered another form of life. The difference was that normal Dao integration practitioners could restrain this aura and make themselves look no different from ordinary people. However, as an evil god, Ji Yunan was too different from normal living beings and could not be concealed at all. You'll get used to it. Ji Yunan stood up from the throne and slowly walked in front of Red Tail. After standing a little closer, the strange aura on Ji Yunan's body seemed to fade a little, and his entire person seemed more real. Red Tail tried his best to calm himself down. He finally understood what Yang Xiaoxiao meant by the unprecedented realm. He continued to report the details of the battle. After the report was done, Red Tail thought for a while and said, "Sir, we killed Lin Huan. If we have 10 years, it doesn't matter." Ji Yunan waved his hand and said, "In the future, the God's attendant army will be in full production. Give orders to the cabinet to prioritize internal affairs in the future." Red Tail was slightly stunned. He did not expect Ji Yunan to suddenly make such a decision. Could it be that this person felt that the development of the God Kingdom had reached its expectations? After Red Tail left, Ji Yunan made a huge adjustment to the development direction of the Divine Kingdom. Then, he walked up to the second floor of the Evil God's Temple alone. For Ji Yunan, rank 10 was not his final goal. After reaching the 10th order, it could only be said that he already had the ability to protect himself. Even if he were to face a main God-level enemy, as long as he was within the Divine Kingdom, he would still be able to fight back. However, Ji Yunan was well aware that if a Dao integration stage cultivator was determined to oppose him, he still wouldn't have any advantage. There was a huge gap between the Dao integration and the Dao integration. Even though Ji Yunan had filled this gap, there was still a gap between him and a Dao integration cultivator. The God Kingdom is in the heavenly world. Even if it hasn't been discovered by the main gods there, I still have to complete the second-class advancement as soon as possible. Ji Yunan was still very anxious. The second floor of the Evil God's Temple was a very special place. If one wanted to reach it, they could only walk step by step along the spiral staircase behind the throne. However, this staircase was astonishingly long. If one walked on foot, it would be enough to make one's scalp go numb. If one's body left the staircase for a moment, then they would never be able to enter the second floor. They would have to leave the staircase and re-enter. The players who could enter the second floor of the Evil God's Temple were all at least rank 10 powerhouses. Most of them had all kinds of special movement techniques. However, if they used spatial abilities at this time, they would probably go around in circles for the rest of their lives. The existence of this trick was something that the players had tried many times before they were able to confirm. Of course, an experienced player like Ji Yunan wouldn't be fooled by this trick. After walking on foot for close to 15 minutes, he finally arrived at the second floor of the Evil God's Temple. The second floor of the Evil God's Temple would only appear when one's God Kingdom reached rank 10. Only after reaching the second floor did he realize how strange this place was. If the main body of the Evil God's Temple was an ordinary palace, then the second floor was a completely independent space. This place looked like an empty starry sky. When Ji Yunan arrived at the second floor, he felt as if he had entered a sea of stars. He could see the Milky Way, and he could reach out and pluck the stars. If this was the first time someone had come here, just this scene alone would take them a long time to examine. However, Ji Yunan seemed to be completely unfazed by this. He continued onward until he reached the end of the Milky Way, where there was a blood-colored skull. A blood sacrifice? I'm quite lucky, Ji Yunan mumbled to himself with a satisfied expression. In the game, the second job advancement was made to be mysterious. However, it was still related to the game itself. It was for the players to carry out the job advancement mission. However, the second job advancement mission that the players would encounter after reaching rank 10 was random. Only when the players personally reached the second floor of the Evil God's Temple would they know the details of the mission. The blood-colored skull that Ji Yunan saw represented the blood sacrifice mission. Among all the job advancement missions, the difficulty was not low, but it was relatively less complicated. This was what Ji Yunan liked the most. After all, he wasn't afraid of the difficulty of the mission. He was only afraid of wasting too much time and exposing the nature of the evil god. Most of the blood sacrifice missions required the players to kill a target and sacrifice the target's god kingdom. The entire realm would be destroyed, and not a single blade of grass would be left. As it was a second job advancement mission, the target would usually be a rank 10, and not an ordinary rank 10. They would either be very powerful or have a powerful background. Of course, the actual methods of carrying out the mission, as well as the specific target that needed the blood sacrifice, would be determined by the blood sacrifice mission itself. Ji Nan reached out and pressed his hand on the blood-colored skull, but he was already thinking about which gods would be the target of the blood sacrifice. Originally, Lorenza was a possibility. She fit the characteristics of being powerful, but now that she was a main god, the blood sacrifice wouldn't be able to reach her. Louis, who had died in the hands of Taoist spirit Sun, wasn't very powerful. However, the skeleton sage who had appeared before was a possibility because he had a good relationship with a main god. When a line of words appeared above the blood-colored skull, Ji Nan's eyes almost popped out. Chapter 458. Reading. Fang Chaoyun was exasperated. This old man had always been stubborn. Back then, Song Fei had made him cultivate Confucianism in order to temper his temper. However, the effect was obviously not very good. Senior brother Fang, now that master is not here, if you don't do anything, the war will be delayed. A young man stood in front of Fang Chaoyun and tried to persuade him. This young man was also one of Song Fei's disciples. His name was Tang Jie. Tang Jie was not very outstanding among Song Fei's disciples. His comprehension was not as good as Liu Yang's, and his strength could not be compared to Fang Chaoyun's and Shi Yayan's. Until now, he had not even reached the realm level. However, Tang Jie was quite famous and had good relations with others. This was because he was a multifaceted person who could do anything. There seemed to be nothing in the world that Tang Jie could not learn. However, once he started, he would encounter all kinds of difficulties when he wanted to go further. He could not go deeper. Therefore, whenever the senior and junior brothers were busy, they would always ask Tang Jie for help. It was the same now. However, Fang Chaoyun's request for Tang Jie's help was a little big. It was so big that Tang Jie did not dare to accept it. He wanted Tang Jie to oversee the war between the two realms. You can do it. Fang Chaoyun blew his beard and glared. He said in an unquestionable tone, Ji Nan bullied me. If I do not make him pay, how can I face master? After Lin Huan died, Fang Chaoyun received the news immediately. At the same time, he also knew where Lin Huan had died. Therefore, this old man did not say anything else. He wanted to hand over the war to Tang Jie and return to the pure gray sky. He wanted to lead the troops to attack. Yes, he would not change his name. Fang Chaoyun could be considered to have a clear distinction between public and private affairs. Lin Huan's death at the hands of Ji Nan was a personal grudge. Therefore, he did not want to delay the war between the two realms. He also did not want to use his power for personal gain to attack Ji Nan. He only wanted to hand over his authority and let his pure gray sky do it. Fang Chaoyun was indeed filled with anger. However, he did not let it get to his head. Previously, he had already suffered a loss in Ji Nan's divine kingdom. He knew that Ji Nan would appear especially powerful with the support of the astral boundary, so he decided to directly attack the astral boundary. As long as he destroyed Ji Nan's astral world, or even weakened the power of the astral world, Fang Chaoyun was confident that he could suppress Ji Nan. Tang Jie was worried to death. He's just an ordinary little Star Lord, so why was he chosen to go to Shi Daotian? However, Fang Chaoyun told him that the sect had already decided that he would be the commander-in-chief of this battle. Tang Jie had no choice but to say, since that's the case, I hope senior brother can settle your personal matters as soon as possible. Junior brother, don't worry. A hint of coldness flashed across Fang Chaoyun's eyes. It won't take long. Ji Nan once again proved that the heavenly world and the world of gods were essentially the same. He had been influenced by his habitual thinking and subconsciously thought that the target of the second profession blood sacrifice should be the gods. However, he did not expect the words Fang Chaoyun to appear. It seems that the selection of the second profession mission is based on the location of the evil god's palace. Ji Nan stroked his chin and pondered the meaning behind this. In other words, the evil god's palace in the divine kingdom was indeed a physical entity that could reflect this world. However, aside from the fact that he came from the heavenly world, Fang Chaoyun was indeed a rather suitable target. He was not considered weak. The Confucian Tao had many kinds of abilities. It was just that he was not good at frontal attacks. Moreover, his background was rare in the world. The number of personal disciples of a Tao integration master was not much higher than that of the Tao integration master. At this moment, Yang Xiaoxiao's voice suddenly sounded in Ji Yunan's mind. Teacher, Shui Ren is here. In a small pavilion in the Divine Kingdom, Ji Yunan and Shui Ren sat opposite each other. Ji Yunan was unhurriedly pouring himself a cup of tea. I thought you were in death seclusion and you wouldn't show yourself even if the sky fell down. Ji Yunan was talking and laughing as if nothing had happened before. Shui Ren smiled and said, if I did not show myself, the Heavenly Deity Association would have disbanded. Isn't there still that old man? Ji Yunan said casually as he sipped his tea. Shui Ren only shook his head and did not intend to explain further. He said in a low voice, Lingyang told me about what happened over there. This whole thing was planned by you. Attacking the magnificent heaven was also part of your plan, wasn't it? Ji Yunan raised his head and looked at him. He said calmly, so what if I did? Seeing that Ji Yunan did not deny it, Shui Ren finally revealed a regretful expression and slowly stood up. He drew his long sword from his waist and said in a low voice, in the face of a disaster, I should not cause any trouble, but I have to give the Grand Sage an explanation. After one sword strike, you and the Heavenly Deity Association will be cleared. Ji Yunan did not even budge. Instead, an interested smile appeared on his face. Looks like you did not force your way out of seclusion. Instead, you made a breakthrough. Shui Ren's expression was expressionless. I was going to let you test my breakthrough. At the same time, Shui Ren's long sword had already stabbed forward. If someone familiar with Shui Ren was here, they would definitely be dumbfounded. This was because his sword strike was imbued with an unprecedentedly powerful sword intent. Everyone knew that Shui Ren had always been the representative of the new sword Tao, and the existence of sword intent was one of the biggest symbols of the traditional sword Tao. Perhaps Shui Ren had also cultivated sword intent in the past, but this sword intent was so powerful that even a high-rank Star Lord might not be able to possess it. In order to progress to the Tao integration stage within 10 years, Shui Ren finally gave up on his perseverance and tried to fuse the new and old sword Tao to create a new path that belonged to him. However, to be able to cultivate sword intent from nothing to this level in less than 2 years, he indeed lived up to his reputation as the #1 swordsman in all the heaven. This sword strike stabbed toward Ji Yunan, and it looked no different from a mortal's attack. It advanced slowly, and there were no nomological fluctuations. Only those who faced this sword strike head-on would be able to sense the countless calculations behind the path of the sword. No matter which direction Ji Yunan moved in, no matter what he did, this sword strike would immediately change. This was because Shui Ren had already exhausted all the variations of the path of the sword. This was Shui Ren's sword strike. However, in front of Ji Yunan, it was like he was winking at a blind man. This was because Ji Yunan did not move at all and allowed the long sword to stab into his chest. A terrifying sword intent erupted, instantly crushing his internal organs, bones, and veins. There was shock in Shui Ren's eyes. Ji Yunan did not even use the power of the Star Realm. Could it be that he was seeking death? Could it be that Shi Daotian really forced him to do something, and Ji Yunan did not want to surrender to the enemy and chose to die by his hand? However, he quickly denied this thought. This was because he saw Ji Yunan slowly stand up, and his body, which had become limp due to the lack of bones, was quickly recovering to its original state. Chapter 459. Read. When Ji Yunan had just made his debut, or rather, when he had just risen to fame in the heavens, some people had guessed that he was the reincarnation of a 9 serenities heavenly demon. It was not impossible for a heavenly demon to reincarnate into a human. Let alone a human, even demons, ghosts, and so on had their own precedents. For example, the heavenly demon that was rumored to be hiding in the Milky Way heaven had reincarnated into a zombie and then cultivated his way up. However, that heavenly demon's final level was far inferior to the current Ji Yunan's. When the Grand Sage Immortal Empress heard Shui Ren's words, she compared Ji Yunan's series of peculiarities and felt that this was more likely. This was because before that heavenly demon had returned to the realm of his previous life, his strength had also advanced astonishingly quickly. However, he had displayed the characteristics of a heavenly demon very early on, which was why he had been discovered. In the end, he had gone into hibernation in the Milky Way heaven. If Ji Nan had been an even more powerful heavenly demon in his previous life, perhaps even a Tao integration heavenly demon, wouldn't this completely match? It was just that he had exposed his aura and raised the limits of his strength slightly. When he heard the words 9 Serenities heavenly demon, Shui Ren was slightly startled. He seemed to think of the similarities between the two, but then he shook his head. He gives me the feeling that he's an ancient evil creature, but not a heavenly demon, Shui Ren said confidently. It wasn't like he had never seen a 9 Serenities heavenly demon before. The difference between the two was too great. He wouldn't be mistaken. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress fell silent once more. She believed in Shui Ren's judgment. After all, only he had truly seen what Ji Nan looked like after his ascension. Zhuangxian continued, since senior Ji Nan came from the world of gods, could he be a creature similar to a heavenly demon? His words caused the entire room to fall silent. Shui Ren then suddenly turned his head. It's very possible. That's his greatest secret. No wonder he specially went to hunt gods, and no wonder he could write the Hunt God Manual. Elder Zi Luo sighed softly, as if all his doubts had been answered. They all understood the nature of heavenly demons. Their cultivation was in opposition to that of cultivators. If Ji Nan was a product of that, then there was an explanation for him hunting gods. The existence of the Hunter God Handbook must have come from his past life experience. Perhaps if we investigate the history of the Pantheon world, we'll be able to find traces of senior Ji Nan. Zhuangxian retracted his gaze and said softly. Of course we have to, Elder Zi Luo said. He then looked at Shui Ren and asked, how are your injuries? I won't die. Shui Ren laughed bitterly and pointed at his chest. But I really have to go into seclusion now. I won't come out until I reach the Tao. Fortune and misfortune go hand in hand, Zi Luo old man commented with a smile. Shui Ren was infatuated with the new sword principle, but he had been slacking on his own cultivation, or rather, he had been unable to calm down. Now that he had suffered such a serious injury, perhaps he could settle down and cultivate properly. Ji Nan's punch had come too fast, so fast that even old man Zi Luo had no time to intervene. After seeing that Shui Ren's life was not in danger, he did not want to waste his chance to intervene. Back when he had advanced, he had suffered a blow from Song Fei. In the end, although he had forcefully fused with the Tao, he had only been able to last for 10 years at most. Moreover, every time he attacked, he had to expend energy, which was equivalent to compressing the limited amount of time he had. Zhuangxian stood up and said, since senior Shui Ren still needs to rest, this humble daoist will not disturb you. You want to go find Ji Nan? The Grand Sage Immortal Empress saw through Zhuangxian's intentions with a single glance and rebuked him. He just injured Shui Ren, and you're already going over. Aren't you being a little too eager? Zhuangxian slowly turned his head and looked her straight in the eye. Other than the three of us, no one else knows about the battle from before. This humble daoist's trip will not affect the dignity of the organization. As for this humble daoist's personal honor, it doesn't matter. Actually, Zhuangxian was not completely accurate when he said that no one knew about the battle between Ji Nan and Shui Ren. There was someone who had been paying close attention to Ji Nan's divine nation recently, and had the ability to see everything, who had coincidentally witnessed that scene. He's become stronger again, Long Linger blinked her eyes and said calmly. There were no ripples in her eyes. Back then, Ji Nan was still in existence on the same level as her, and he even had to expend a great deal of effort to deal with her. But in the blink of an eye, he was already able to injure Shui Ren. Lu Wen's fingers lightly tapped on the table as he pondered something in his mind. He's still a step away. After an unknown amount of time, Lu Wen finally spoke. Fang Chaoyun is going to act against Ji Nan, but his mind hasn't completely lost its mind. Go help him. All right. Long Ling-er responded. Her figure instantly soared into the sky, transforming into a huge dragon that roared to the 9 heavens. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared into the void. Ever since he knew that pure startling heaven was the target of the blood sacrifice, Ji Nan had immediately entered the stage of preparation. There were some differences between blood sacrifice and gathering points. If the divine attendants killed someone, there would always be situations where they missed something. It was impossible to cover every single detail. In other words, there were only so many divine attendants, and it was impossible to search every corner of an astral plane. The enemies weren't fools, so why would they just stand there and let you kill them? Therefore, if he wanted to sacrifice an entire plane, he had to rely on the legendary Great Blood Sacrifice formation. As for the various props and materials needed to set up the formation, it wasn't something that could be gathered in a short period of time. Some of them required Ji Nan to construct through the Divine Nation, while others had to be gathered from the outside. The Divine Nation part was easy to deal with. After all, after conquering Magnificent Emperor Heaven, he would gain quite a lot of points, which was enough to rebuild an army of divine attendants. Some of the materials that needed to be gathered from the outside made Red Tail's subordinates unbearably tired, but their efficiency still couldn't satisfy Ji Nan. This situation lasted for close to half a month. Then, as if someone had sent him a pillow when he was dozing off, Zhuang Xian arrived at the Divine Nation. This humble daoist has come this time to invite Senior to return to the Heavenly Deity Society. Zhuang Xian sat in front of Ji Nan, still using daoist spirit son's method of counting himself as a junior. Ji Nan didn't hesitate and directly asked, "I need a batch of materials. Can the Heavenly Deity Society provide them?" Zhuang Xian didn't even ask what the materials were. He immediately said, "As long as Senior returns, the organization will naturally provide them to Senior as soon as we can find them." Ji Nan smiled and patted his shoulder. "Young lad, what are you saying? When did I leave the organization? I've always been a member of the Heavenly Deity Society." Zhuang Xian had already experienced Ji Nan's shamelessness. Perhaps he was born expressionless, but he still said calmly, "Senior, please provide me with a list of materials. This humble daoist will definitely do his best to gather them." Ji Nan had naturally prepared a list of materials, so he directly gave Zhuang Xian a copy. However, when he remembered that he could still borrow the Heavenly Deity Society's help, he had other thoughts. Sacrificing the entire Terpsichore realm wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. Perhaps he thought about how there was a lot of tedious work to do in the early stages. Now that he had free labor, was there any reason not to use it? Thus, Ji Nan said, "Can you provide me with another batch of people?" Zhuang Xian agreed to everything and even took the initiative to share his burden. "Senior, are you going to wage war against the astral realm again? If it's a normal astral realm, I want to attack the Terpsichore realm." Chapter 460. Read. Genius in 1 second. Live in Di Cho Boluan. Not only was Xue Ren's sword unavoidable, but his sword intent had also increased his power after he switched to the traditional sword Dao. It could be said that he was at his peak. However, Ji Nan was completely unaffected. His body, which had been damaged by the sword intent, quickly recovered. Then, he threw a punch. Xue Ren's reaction was extremely fast. He swung his sword again and used his signature wave sword, which enveloped Ji Nan's fist like a cloud. After all, Xue Ren was at the peak of the All Heavens, second only to Dao reunion cultivators. He had never been afraid of anyone. Even though Ji Nan had used the power of the astral boundary to injure Fang Chaoyun, who was also a level 10 cultivator, how could Fang Chaoyun compare to Xue Ren? The top swordsman in the All Heavens, the person closest to Dao reunion, the founder of the new sword Dao. Xue Ren could be crowned with all kinds of titles, but Fang Chaoyun could only be called Song Fei's disciple at most. However, there was one thing that Xue Ren and Fang Chaoyun were not different from each other. When facing Ji Nan's fist, neither of them had a good way to deal with it. Be it waves or matter, when the sword shadow collided with Ji Nan's fist, all the nomological laws were instantly shattered, and all the sword intent was immediately destroyed. Under the suppression of pure power, no matter how lofty the nomological laws and secrets were, they could no longer exist. Ji Nan's fist easily broke through the sword shadow and then hit Xue Ren's chest. Xue Ren was like an ordinary person who had been hit by a cannon. A large cloud of blood burst out of his chest, and blood even spurted out from his back. Countless pieces of flesh and blood fell into the air, and a strange fragrance spread out. With Shui Ren's current cultivation base, his flesh and bones were all treasures, but now, he was throwing them away as if they were worthless. How could Shui Ren care about that? He didn't even have time to say a word. His body turned into a beam of sword light and quickly flew out of the astral boundary. Not dead. Ji Nan looked in the direction where the sword light had left, and then looked at the scattered flesh and blood on the ground. However, since Shui Ren did not die under this punch, Ji Nan did not bother to chase after him. There was nothing to gain from killing Shui Ren, and if he were to make a big fuss about it, he would definitely be exposed. He still had to deal with Fang Chaoyun, and it would be best if he could kill him in one strike. There was no benefit in revealing his strength in advance. The result seemed to be no different from what Shui Ren had said at the beginning. After the sword, they were even. However, this result might not be what Shui Ren liked. Extreme sword heaven. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress sat there all by herself. She no longer had the high-spirited air of the past, but at the very least, she had not completely lost her spirit. In the end, she decisively gave up the astral world in exchange for her own escape. After escaping, he immediately came to Extreme Sword Heaven, still holding on to the hope of returning to the magnificent Emperor Heaven. There were two other people by her side. One was Zhuangxian, who had come again after hearing the news, and the other was naturally Old Man Ziluo. Originally, when they saw Old Man Ziluo, they knew that Shui Ren was still in seclusion. They thought that there was no hope of returning to the astral world for the time being, but they did not expect that Shui Ren would come out at this crucial moment. After hearing about what had happened recently, Shui Ren did not have any intention of saying anything. He immediately rushed over to Ji Yunan's side. Then, they all saw what happened next. Shui Ren's position was not hidden from them. Through Shui Ren's existence, they saw what had happened in Ji Yunan's divine kingdom. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress fell silent. She did not bring up the matter of revenge again. In her heart, she even rejoiced a little if she had not run fast enough. Shui Ren could have taken that punch head-on, but she did not have that ability. After a long period of silence, it was Zhuangxian who first coughed and said, "If Senior Shui Ren's life is not in danger, the most important thing right now is to invite Senior Ji Yunan back to the Heavenly God Society." When he said this, there was only calmness and coldness in his eyes, devoid of any emotion. Shui Ren said that Zhuangxian and his master, Daoist Spirit Yang, were the same kind of person, but these words were actually not completely accurate. Daoist Spirit Yang still had friends and relationships, but Zhuangxian had nothing. He was like the calmest of spectators, always able to make the most correct decision. After Shui Ren had taken that punch, it was unknown how long it would take for him to recover. Instead, Ji Yunan had become the most important person to fight for. No matter what he had used to rise from the world level to the heaven level in the blink of an eye, and then grow to the point where he could easily injure Shui Ren, as long as Ji Yunan stood at this position, he was worth fighting for. The Heavenly God Society needed another Dao-fusing practitioner. This was the most important goal of the entire organization. As the person involved, the Grand Sage Immortal Empress had just suffered the loss of the entire astral world. She clearly could not be so magnanimous. He must have used some kind of secret technique. Fusing the Dao is not child's play. She stood up and spoke quickly, as if she wanted to refute Zhuangxian with all her strength. How long has it been since Ji Yunan made his debut? 200 years. Where did he get the foundation to talk about Dao fusing? Zhuangxian's expression did not change. He said calmly, someone who made his debut less than 200 years ago, yet was able to easily defeat Senior Shui Ren. This is also unprecedented. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress's expression slowly sank. Of course, she knew that if they could rope in Ji Yunan, the organization would not suffer any losses, but how could they swallow this? Ji Yunan killed Alfred and publicly attacked the magnificent heavens. Why should we keep such a person in the organization? The Grand Sage Immortal Empress said coldly. If that's the case, then why don't we let Fang Chaoyun in as well? Zhuangxian remained expressionless. If Senior Ji Yunan rejects our proposal, and Senior Shui Ren's injuries are not optimistic, then accepting Fang Chaoyun is not out of the question. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress did not know what to say. She could only glare at him coldly. You and that Jiyu Nan really are the same kind of people, both unscrupulous. Zhuang Xian did not say anything in response to this pure accusation. It was as if all of this was a cool breeze. Elder Zi Luo's face was also expressionless. He only watched the two of them argue. Only now did he slowly say, "Let's not be in a hurry to argue about this. Shui Ren has returned." Just as he finished speaking, the two of them saw Shui Ren's figure appear, standing right in front of them. Shui Ren's face was pale. There seemed to be a piece missing from his chest, leaving behind a large hole. Half of his heart had been completely destroyed, but the other half was still beating. Jiyu Nan. Shui Ren staggered over and sat down on a chair with difficulty. He's not human. The first sentence that Shui Ren said after he arrived stunned the three of them at the same time. Even Elder Zi Luo did not notice Jiyu Nan's strangeness because they were separated by the star realm. Only Shui Ren, who had personally met Jiyu Nan, noticed the strange aura on Jiyu Nan's body. Chapter 461. Read. Zhuang Xian felt that a sane person would not choose to attack the pure grace heaven at this time. To be precise, as long as Shi Daotian was still alive, it was not a good time to attack the pure grace heaven. Zhuang Xian rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. He started to doubt whether it was the right decision to rope in Jiyu Nan again. This kind of battle maniac might bring the organization down with him. Even if the Heavenly God Society produced another Dao-fusing cultivator and Old Man Zi Luo obtained a chance to recover and continue to exist, the Heavenly God Society would not be able to start an all-out war with Shi Daotian. This was not a matter of strength. It was very difficult for Dao-fusing cultivators to kill each other, especially in a one-on-one fight. If they could not kill each other, rashly starting a war would only lead to the destruction of the forces under both sides. Thus, battles between Dao-fusing cultivators were usually restrained. They would either limit themselves or send representatives to fight. Countless thoughts flashed through Zhuang Xian's mind, but his final answer was, "We will do our best to cooperate." He knew that Jiyu Nan was very dangerous, but he also knew that he had no other choice. If he did not rope in Jiyu Nan, the organization would most likely face the situation of disbanding when the 10-year period was up. And if the situation did not turn out as expected, he could just expel Jiyu Nan and clean up the Heavenly God Society. Just as Jiyu Nan received a satisfactory answer, in the pure grace heaven, Fang Chaoyun was continuously sending spies into Jiyu Nan's god nation to investigate. Fang Chaoyun was a very old Star Lord. Before becoming the Star Lord, he had not been the kind of person who buried himself in cultivation. Instead, he had been a general and a minister, and he was very capable in handling political and military affairs. When the war between the two worlds started, when Song Fei was busy dealing with the lords, Fang Chaoyun was in charge of the main battle. This was not just because he was Song Fei's eldest disciple, but also because he had the ability. Fang Chaoyun's weakness, apart from his irritable nature, was that his personal combat power was not the best. Ever since he had become Song Fei's disciple, he had learned how to defeat 10,000 enemies. He hated people like Shui Ren and Jiyu Nan who focused on themselves the most. When Fang Chaoyun made up his mind to attack Jiyu Nan, his actions became orderly. The troops were mobilized, the intelligence was analyzed, and all the operations were carried out in an exceptionally orderly manner. This was also thanks to the previous war between the two worlds, which allowed the members of the Terpsichore sect to gain sufficient experience, and they had long since gotten used to the rhythm of war. Now that Fang Chaoyun gave the order, it was just a change of target. Compared to the enormous Pantheon world, Jiyu Nan's Never Change Your Name world was pitifully small. Once the enormous Terpsichore was mobilized, it would not be difficult to find out the ins and outs of Jiyu Nan's god kingdom. Fang Chaoyun was right, but he soon encountered a problem. Almost all the people who went to spy on the situation reported to him the same thing: this astral realm did not allow outsiders to enter. Old Fang almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What kind of weird astral realm would make such a rule? The other planet leaders wanted a lot of people to gather. They wanted all the break-world people to stay in their own astral world because they represented the power of the astral world. Denying outsiders entry was like cutting themselves off from the rest of the world. Actually, ever since Jiyu Nan's astral world was exposed, We've been investigating it, a scout reported. Since then, this policy has always been in place, but it wasn't as strict as it is now. Back then, Ji Nan had relied on the fact that his astral world was not known to others, and he had been very unrestrained for a period of time. So when his astral world was exposed, it immediately attracted a lot of attention, and many forces had secretly sent out spies. Of course, Terpsichore had done something similar, and so they had gotten this strange result. Fang Chaoyun frowned as he listened. If Ji Nan had been carrying out this policy since that year, it meant that it was not a last-minute decision, and it was not because of this incident. You said that the policy was not strict back then? Fang Chaoyun asked. Yes. The scout quickly nodded. Ji Nan leveled up too fast. The management of the astral world could not keep up with his speed. In the beginning, some of our people sneaked in, but they were not discovered. He paused. Seeing Fang Chaoyun frown and not say anything, he went on to say, but ever since it became a world-class astral world, it has been very difficult to sneak in. As long as a world breaker enters it, they are quickly found and expelled. They investigate the break world people from all over the world. Fang Chaoyun looked serious. No. The scout stuttered. They don't investigate. If they find someone, they will be killed. Recently, I found 3 groups of people planning to sneak in. Yang Xiaoxiao showed her body. She sat on the table in front of Ji Nan. I picked a few people to interrogate, but I did not get anything out of them. Not getting anything out of them is a result. Ji Nan put down the document he was holding and rubbed his temples. If he could not get anything out of them, it meant that they had received very strict training. If they could withstand Yang Xiaoxiao's attacks, they must have come from a higher level of power. They are probably from Terpsichore Sky. I received news that they are mobilizing and gathering a new army. It doesn't look like they are going to the front lines. Even though Terpsichore Sky used the front lines to cover it up, people could still see some clues. On the other hand, Lin Huan had died in God Nation, but Terpsichore Sky did not do anything. That was not normal. Teacher, should we send a small army to harass them? Yang Xiaoxiao suggested. God Nation leveled up to level 10 with Ji Nan. The leveling up of a plane was a slow process. Yang Xiaoxiao was the spirit of God Nation, so she was the first to benefit. The clones she created looked like real people. They were no longer just shadows. Plus, these clones could not be killed. They had no source. If she wanted to, she could even create hundreds of clones on the spot and arrange them in a square formation. Go. Ji Nan nodded. No need to inform Red Tail. You can just send God's servants. God's servants were the most cost-effective way to expend resources. As long as they could kill enough, the points they earned could be used to create new God's servants. The enemy's damage could not be recovered. Yang Xiaoxiao immediately agreed. She stuck out her tongue and licked her lips, her eyes flashing with excitement. The closer she was to God Nation, the more authority she had over the living beings in God Nation. The God's servants, especially, were products of construction. She could directly command them. Sending an army to Terpsichore Sky was a great way to relieve boredom for Yang Xiaoxiao, who had not been on the battlefield for a long time. Chapter 462. Read. Old Man Fang couldn't swallow his anger. The fact that the Terpsichore heavens wanted to start a war couldn't be hidden from Ji Nan. Or rather, for a super-astral realm like the Terpsichore heavens, it was impossible to completely conceal such a major event that concerned the entire astral realm. Not everyone was like Ji Nan. The army was made up of emotionless divine servants, and the soldiers themselves were residents of the astral realm. However, it was obviously impossible for the Terpsichore heavens to deploy an army so easily. Ji Nan needed to disrupt the Terpsichore heavens as much as possible so that the Heavenly God Union could deploy a blood sacrifice spell formation. The blood sacrifice spell formation sounded very impressive, but the principle behind it was very simple. To put it bluntly, it was to kill the living beings within the spell formation and then absorb their flesh, souls, and all their power. The level of the spell formation only affected the efficiency of the killing and the degree of power it could gather. The Terpsichore heavens wasn't a Dao integration realm, so there were almost no Star Lords there. Realmbreakers were the most powerful beings there. Thus, the blood sacrifice spell formation set up by the Heavenly God Union wouldn't have much of a problem in terms of killing. The real difficulty in setting up the spell formation this time was how to activate the spell formation in the entire Terpsichore heavens at the same time and how to gather all the power together. Our plan is to set up 999 area-level spell formations. Each area-level spell formation will be composed of 365 area-level spell formations. Zhuangxian stood in front of Ji Yunan and patiently explained the blood sacrifice plan. The blood sacrifice couldn't be hidden from the Heavenly God Union. Zhuangxian knew what Ji Yunan was going to do as soon as he received the list of materials that Ji Yunan had requested. Zhuangxian had made ample preparations. Not only had he prepared the blood sacrifice spell formation plan, but he had even detailed the locations of each spell formation. Of course, this couldn't have been done by him alone. He must have used a massive amount of manpower and resources from the Heavenly God Union, and many of their members might have even sacrificed their lives. Ji Yunan couldn't help but nod with satisfaction after reading through Zhuangxian's plan. This young man's way of doing things was indeed very reassuring. It could almost be described as watertight. Even Ji Yunan couldn't find any obvious loopholes in this plan. As for the blood sacrifice spell, although the blood-red skull didn't give it to him directly, Ji Yunan knew a few of them. Zhuangxian's method was unique to the All Heavens. Perhaps there were some traces of the ancient demonic sects, and at the same time, they were improved with modern techniques. Be it efficiency or concealment, they were enough to satisfy him. Terpsichore is going to be at war soon. Your men can take the opportunity to sneak in and set up a formation, Ji Yunan said to Zhuangxian. Senior, Zhuang, he said. It's help. To set up a great formation that covered the entire startling sky was clearly not something that could be completed in a short period of time. The battle had to start as soon as possible, but the longer it dragged on, the better. Therefore, Ji Yunan could not scare Larofang away as soon as he arrived. Otherwise, it would not be so easy for him to set up a trap when he returned to the pure grace heaven. Ji Yunan also understood this and immediately nodded in agreement. At this moment, Yang Xiaoxiao's figure suddenly appeared. She looked very serious. The graceful sky sect has made their move. Master. A middle-aged Confucian scholar followed behind Fang Chaoyun, trying to persuade him anxiously, several armies haven't returned yet. Don't move. If I can't take him down in one strike, it will definitely turn into a stalemate. Without turning his head, Fang Chaoyun said coldly, Ji Yunan sent troops to harass my border and sent people to kill 6 of my disciples. This is intolerable. The middle-aged Confucian scholar was still trying to persuade him. There's something fishy about the deaths of my martial brothers and sisters. It might not be Ji Yunan's doing. Moreover, even if it's him, he's still trying to provoke us to start the war earlier. Master, you must not fall into his trap. There were too many people in this world who knew how to play tricks. It was impossible to hide from everyone. Therefore, most of the time, overt schemes were the ones that worked. Fang Chaoyun was facing this kind of situation. Even if he knew it was a trap, even if he knew that there might be a third party behind this, there had to be an explanation for the deaths of his 6 disciples. I've made up my mind. There's no need to say more, old Fang said coldly. Set off immediately. We'll take down the target in 3 days. In reality, it was rare for there to be an all-out war between planes that were above the realm level. On one hand, it was rare for there to be a huge difference in power. On the other hand, it was very difficult to mobilize troops. Realm breakers could freely travel to the major planes, but the armies below could not do that. They could only rely on large-scale space transmission methods. This method was expensive. Once the war started, before the enemy could be killed, a large amount of money would have been spent. Fighting a war was to fight for money. This could be said at any time. However, the graceful sky didn't care about money this time. Fang Chaoyun didn't care either. He just wanted to completely destroy Ji Yunan's astral world. Fang Chaoyun even hired a group of suicide squad members from other planes at a high price. They would be the first wave of people to attack. This was to reduce his own losses. What Fang Chaoyun did not expect was that Ji Yunan's resistance to this invasion was unexpectedly strong. Ji Yunan didn't even show up. The astral world was determined to use the strategy of fortifying the walls and clearing the fields. All the people moved toward the center of the city. Or rather, they didn't need to move. That was because Ji Yunan's arrangements in the God Kingdom didn't allow the people to go out. Everyone had to live in the city. Did they prepare for this? Fang Chaoyun didn't enter Ji Yunan's astral world. He just stayed outside to observe. He was waiting for the moment Ji Yunan couldn't help but strike. Based on the current situation, that day would be a long time coming. The enemy seemed to be very organized, and the guards of each city just happened to make it impossible for them to continue their offensive. Once they started mobilizing their troops, the enemy would immediately adjust. The distance between them and world breakers didn't matter. Fang Chaoyun sat in the military tent. In front of him was a very intricately made sand table. He could even control it to accurately display the terrain of various places. If the enemy has a hard-to-detect detection method, then let's not play with strategy. Gather all our power and attack one city. In the God Kingdom, they can't use their troops to defeat me, Yang Xiaoxiao said calmly. It was as if she was talking about something unimportant. So, they can only fight us head-on, Ji Yunan said casually. We have 100 cities. We have time to play hide and seek with them. Yang Xiaoxiao smiled. Zhuangxian's people have arrived. Teacher, are you still not going? Of course, I am going. Ji Yunan said, send another suicide squad. This time, we will light a fire in Old Fang's backyard. Okay. Yang Xiaoxiao didn't mind. But before we go, there is one person you need to meet. Who? Qinghe Realm, Zhong Qinghe. Chapter 463. Read. Ji Yunan had never seen Zhong Qinghe before. At least in his memory, he had never seen this celestial-level Starlord in person, even though there was some interaction between the two. Back then, when Ji Yunan first came up with the idea of a player army, it was because he brought Zhong Dai to the Pantheon world and used Zhong Dai as a test subject for the first time. Zhong Dai was Zhong Qinghe's daughter. Later, because of her identity, the people of the Qinghe realm tried to bring Zhong Dai back, but the result was obvious. But this was not important. Because even though the player army played a role in the end, completely worthy of Ji Yunan's efforts, Zhong Dai was already useless. Ji Yunan held her in his hands purely because he did not want the Bloodbreed's root to spread. Now that Zhong Qinghe had suddenly come to him, Ji Yunan felt a little strange. Of course, with his current strength, he did not care about a rank 7 or 8 Starlord at all. Just a moment later, Zhong Qinghe was brought in front of Ji Yunan. He did not even go to see his daughter. Lord Ji Yunan. Zhong Qinghe looked very kind and always had a smile on his face. He was like an ordinary merchant and not a high and mighty Starlord. What's the matter? Ji Yunan did not have any intention of talking nonsense with him and asked directly. Zhong Qinghe did not mind and just smiled calmly. I heard that Lord has some conflict with old Mr. Fang. Do you need help? How do you want to help? Ji Yunan asked non-committally. If you want to talk about fighting, I naturally do not have the ability to intervene in your fight, Zhong Qinghe said again. But Lord, your astral realm has just been established. I'm afraid you lack things to attack and defend a city. When he heard this, 4 words suddenly popped into Ji Yunan's mind: arms dealer. At first, Ji Yunan did not think that Zhong Qinghe, a dignified Starlord, would actually come out to do this kind of business. However, Zhong Qinghe establishing the astral realm through commerce was most likely his way of cultivation, so it was understandable. Speaking of which, the entry point that Zhong Qinghe chose was also very tricky, so Ji Yunan had no reason to refuse. Now, Ji Yunan was able to stall the battle in the God Kingdom. He was relying on the player army. He still had a lot of Breakworld people. He was using high-end powers to keep things going. However, Fang Chaoyun had already realized the existence of Yang Xiaoxiao, so he decided to gather his forces and attack one city after another. The following battles were likely to be defensive battles. Even though there were many cities in the Divine Kingdom, the abundance of resources determined how long each city could last. Just as Zhong Qinghe had said, Ji Yunan had always developed his divine kingdom on his own, so he didn't have many reserves in this area. You know, I don't have money, Ji Yunan said with a smile, but his eyes were already locked on Zhong Qinghe. Regardless of whether he had money or not, he definitely wanted it. Zhong Qinghe seemed to have expected this. You don't need to pay. I will send the supplies here. Price. Zhong Qinghe smiled and said, if Mr. loses this battle, then there is no need to talk about it. If Mr. defeats Mr. Fang, then please give me some soup. Ji Yunan looked at him for a long time. He finally nodded and said, deal. Zhong Qinghe was indeed a qualified businessman. No one could find any reason to refuse the price he offered. Ji Yunan had reason to believe that he had placed a bet on Fang Chaoyun, and he was offering something that old Fang needed. No matter who won in the end, Zhong Qinghe might not be the biggest winner, but he would not be the loser. The victory of a plain war was enough for everyone involved to earn a lot of money. Zhong Qinghe is a person who is good at playing both sides, Zhuang Xian said. I tried to recruit him a few times, but he rejected me every time. Ji Yunan quickly put Zhong Qinghe's matter to the back of his mind. Now, he was on pure terpsichore. This time, Ji Yunan did not come alone. Instead, he came with a group of Heavenly Deity Association members on Starship. With Ji Yunan's current level, directly entering the plane was like a huge light bulb in the night. There was no way for him to hide. Using Starship as a cover, it would not be so easy to discover him once he entered the pure terpsichore. After all, people like Yang Xiaoxiao were rare, and the pure terpsichore clearly did not receive such treatment. Zhuang Xian also came. He had to be in charge of setting up the blood sacrifice formation in various places. You bet very decisively, Ji Yunan said as he looked at Zhuang Xian. Personally participating in this matter was tantamount to forming a death grudge with Shi Daotian's faction. There was no turning back. If things did not work out, the Heavenly Deity Association could give up on Ji Yunan. Of course, they could also give up on Zhuang Xian. Zhuang Xian remained expressionless as he said honestly, if I don't want Senior to go back on his word, this is the best way. Ji Yunan could not help but laugh. Actually, Zhuang Xian wasn't wrong at all. Ji Yunan could totally do something like accepting someone else's help and then walking away after that. There were too many players who accepted money from NPCs but did not do anything. On the other hand, Zhuang Xian had chosen to stand on Ji Yunan's side. If Ji Yunan turned against him and refused to acknowledge him, his reputation would suffer too much. This was tantamount to adding a condition to the quest. Giving up on the quest would result in a huge loss of reputation points. Thus, the cost of turning against Zhuang Xian increased. Seeing Zhuang Xian's sincerity, Ji Yunan did not mention this matter anymore. He quickly immersed himself in setting up the blood sacrifice formation. A blood sacrifice was not as simple as drawing a formation on the ground and throwing in 2 energy sources. To complete the blood sacrifice on a target, the formation itself needed to be powerful enough, and to gather and transport the power obtained from the blood sacrifice, the formation needed to be tightly linked. There was a step in the latter that could only be completed by Ji Yunan himself. He had to provide the blood sacrifice source for every formation, which was the blood-colored skull. Otherwise, how could the formation transmit power if the skull did not participate in setting up the formation? Setting up a real formation wasn't a game, where the power could be sent wherever one wanted. On the other hand, Comrade Old Fang was no fool. How could there be no one guarding his hometown when he was going to the front lines? Usually, there were no other astral lords in Terpsichore, but it was very normal to find a few fellow astral lords to help during a crucial time like this. The blood sacrifice formation continued to be set up, and it was very difficult not to attract the attention of Terpsichore. At this time, Ji Yunan had to take action. Thus, Fang Chaoyun and Ji Yunan went to each other's astral realms, each with their own thoughts. One started to attack the city openly, and the other secretly planned to destroy the world. Chapter 464. Reading. Since Fang Chaoyun practiced Confucianism, the Terpsichore was also a plane dominated by Confucianism. Here, the phrase reading is the best could be said to be the most perfect interpretation. Whether it was martial arts or Taoism, no matter in terms of cultivation progress or actual power, it could not be compared with Confucianism. Confucianism was the absolute mainstream here. The terpsichore covered a large area, but unlike many planes, the world was divided into many realms. Instead, it was a unified whole. Fang Chaoyun did not divide the astral plane into multiple levels of administrative districts. Instead, he built academies of various levels in each place, and the academies controlled the corresponding areas. In short, the responsibility of the people's government was given to the academies, which were originally only responsible for teaching. We have chosen 999 domain-level arrays, and the landing points are all in the academies of the first level of the province test. But it is not so easy to choose the big arrays below. Zhuangxian held the map in his hand and explained in detail to Ji Yunan. He paused for a moment and continued, "So I suggest that we go to all the domain-level array eyes, leave the aura of the blood sacrifice source, and then let the people below choose the precise location." "Okay." Ji Yunan nodded and said, "Where shall we start?" "The Terpsichore Academy." "Damn it. Why do they have heavenly fire heavy crossbows?" In Ji Yunan's Holy Kingdom, when the vanguard army from the Terpsichore Academy attacked a city, they paid a heavy price for their carelessness. A young Confucian scholar kept comforting himself with a livid face. "It's not the fault of the battle, it's not the fault of the battle. Who knew they even have a heaven-level god weapon?" Xu Yubin was the commander of the vanguard army, and he usually liked the art of war. This time, he finally got the opportunity to lead the army. He thought he could take down a city first, but he did not even see the enemy, but killed most of the soldiers with heavenly fire heavy crossbows. As a real heaven-level god weapon, heavenly fire heavy crossbow was not a cold weapon. Trajectory calibration, automatic lock-on, precise strike, shockwave deflection. Modern missiles had integrated all of these features, but it was just a matter of whether it could be used or not. There were many star-sky technology planes in the universe. Science didn't play a role in the top combat forces, and the reason was that metaphysical technology was more powerful. It was that simple. "General, we can't fight this battle anymore." A subordinate ran in front of Xu Yubin and said anxiously, "Not only does the enemy have heavenly fire crossbows, but they've also prepared a dim light barrier. There's no way the elite squad can sneak in." Xu Yubin felt as if his body was about to collapse. If a frontal assault failed, sending in an elite squad to coordinate with the outside and inside was the best method. After all, in Xu Yubin's eyes, such a crude city-state was no different from a grassy village. But why would there be a dim light enchantment in such a small village? It was as unreliable as a small village in the mountains, having 20 subway lines. Just this barrier alone is worth more than your entire city. Okay. It can't be a local product. Someone must be helping them secretly. Xu Yubin's mind flashed with this thought, and he calmed down. As long as they could confirm the authenticity of the information and bring it back, this bit of loss for the vanguard army was completely acceptable. Just as Xu Yubin was about to give the order to retreat, a voice sounded in his ear. "Hey, do you have money?" Xu Yubin looked back with surprise. He saw a girl standing behind him. She was the one who had spoken. Next to the girl, there was a boy who was about the same age as her. His face was full of arrogance. It looked as if he didn't want to say anything. "Who are you?" Xu Yubin was on guard and quickly asked. On this astral world, 99% of the people were their enemies. Hearing Xu Yubin's question, the young man was annoyed. "I told you. No idiot would answer your question. Let's take it first." Xu Yubin coldly laughed. He was a world breaker, and he was in the middle of a military formation. Wait, this was a planet master. A moment later, the remaining half of the vanguard army was killed. Only Xu Yubin was left. He was a general without an army. First, they attacked from the front. Then, they sent a top elite to sneak attack. Xu Yubin did this, and Yang Xiaoxiao did the same. Xie Yun retracted the law of fullness that was unique to a Star Lord, and asked solemnly again, "Do you have money?" Pure Grey Sky's attack was fierce, but Fang Chaoyun did not expect his backyard to be infiltrated. Pure Grace Academy was where Fang Chaoyun taught. He was the dean, and it was the best school in all of Pure Grace Sky. The school was in charge of administration. It was the center of the astral world. Ji Yunan and Zhuang Xian didn't conceal themselves. They just walked openly near the Pure Swan Academy and waited for the grand formation to be set up. This place is not bad. Ji Yunan looked inside the academy. The interior was suitable for studying. The atmosphere of the academy was everywhere. It is a shame. He shook his head. All the people who set up the formation were on their way. What they needed to do next was to make Pure Grace Sky a mess. Ji Yunan sent an order to the God Kingdom. Yang Xiaoxiao had already prepared an army. They landed near Pure Grace Sky. They descended from the sky above Pure Grace Academy. Zhuang Xian knew that Ji Yunan was prepared, but when he saw the appearance of the army, he was surprised. It was not that the army looked strange. Zhuang Xian was experienced and knowledgeable, so he did not lose his composure. All the members of the army came from the same race. They were even humanoid creatures, and all of them were devastatingly beautiful. This was an army of succubi. Ji Yunan had accumulated a lot of points, but this battle would not be short. Of course, he had to use good steel where it mattered most. What was the most effective way to deal with Confucian scholars? Threats and temptations were not as effective as these scantily dressed succubi, who would not mind even if they stripped naked. This was because Ji Yunan's goal this time was to cause trouble, not just kill. Senior, you are always surprising. Zhuang Xian's expression was still wooden as he shook his head. As Zhuang Xian spoke, the succubi army had already gathered into a colorful cloud. It then scattered and quickly fell from the sky. Almost in the blink of an eye, white bodies could be seen everywhere in Pure Grace Academy. These succubi did not take the initiative to attack people. They only acted as if they were innocent passers-by. As a result, the academy was filled with chants like "Do not look at indecent behavior." It was not just the academy. The entire city where the academy was located was attacked by the succubi. The old Confucian scholars who had been cultivating for many years might be able to resist the temptation of the succubi, but not many people outside of the academy had the ability. In just 2 days, the news reached Fang Chaoyun. A disciple stood in front of Fang Chaoyun and stammered, "Master." Fang Chaoyun frowned. "Is the astral plane under attack? I asked your uncle Master Lin to help guard it. It should be fine." "The astral plane is fine." The disciple stammered. Uncle Master Lin, he has already married 10 new concubines. The elders said that they want to chase him out. Chapter 465. Read. Ridiculous. This is too ridiculous. In the Pure Grace Academy, a white-haired old man who was still dressed in Confucian robes was throwing a tantrum in the hall. Around the old man stood men, young and old. They were all dressed in Confucian robes as well. They were the disciples and teachers of the Pure Grace Academy. The Pure Grace Academy was overseen by Fang Chaoyun. Almost all the disciples were under him, including the teachers. In reality, there were no teachers in the academy. Most of them were senior brothers who taught on behalf of their teachers. For example, the old man before them was called Hu Songshan. He was the oldest among Fang Chaoyun's disciples. Many of the students in the academy had been brought up by him. "Senior brother Hu, please calm down." Someone beside him could only persuade him with a bitter expression. "Uncle Master Lin isn't a Confucian like us after all. He doesn't mind marriage." The Uncle Master Lin they spoke of was Fang Chaoyun's junior brother. He was Song Fei's 9th disciple, Lin Ling, who had been invited to help guard the astral realm. Lin Ling was definitely one of the more unique disciples among Song Fei's disciples. He had cultivated the sword all his life, but he was not like many swordsmen who were obsessed with the sword. Instead, he was more like a vagabond who liked to eat and drink without restraint. He would always have a heavenly dragon as his mount when he went out. His harem was filled with thousands of beauties. Even he could not remember how many there were. When the succubus army arrived, the other disciples of the Pure Grace Academy were fine. Even if they were tempted, they had to consider the academy's rules. However, Lin Ling had no such qualms. Even his senior brother Fang Chaoyun could not interfere with his private affairs, much less his juniors. More importantly, although Lin Ling loved to enjoy himself, he was not a lecher. He had never gone to the world of gods. Now that a group of succubi had presented themselves to him, he had a new taste. He was so happy that he forgot about his duties. However, Lin Ling had taken in 10 concubines in a row. He was so ostentatious in the academy that it seemed as if he was afraid that others would not know. It would affect the academy's reputation greatly. Taking concubines had become the norm in the city. If he was accused of indecency, he could say that he had learned from the Pure Grace Academy. What the hell? Hu Songshan was so furious because he had heard some rumors outside. He could not help but gather everyone here to discuss a countermeasure. Even so, how can he disturb the peace of the academy? Hu Songshan stared at the person who spoke and said, "If Uncle Master Lin wants to take a concubine, just ask him to go out and do it. This isn't appropriate." The person beside him said cautiously. The Confucian sect placed great importance on etiquette. Since his master was away, he naturally had to leave his martial uncle at home, not to mention that his martial uncle had come to help. It was reasonable not to disturb the peace of the academy, but it was also reasonable to not let uncle wander outside. Hu Songshan was so angry that his hands were trembling, and he couldn't say a word. Everyone was so scared that they quickly helped him to sit down, for fear that something bad would happen to him. The old man was too old. Even if he had break world power, no matter if it was his body or his rules, they had been eroded by time. Without becoming a Star Lord, one would never be able to live eternally. Don't worry, senior brother. We've already sent the news to Master. We just need to wait for him to make a decision. Yeah. Master will definitely seek justice for us. But Martial Uncle Lin is indeed a little too much. Those women are obviously not from good families. I'm afraid they are witches who want to suck people's essence. Senior brother, you are wrong. Who is Martial Uncle Lin? Why would he care about witches? If those women had evil intentions, he would have cleaned them up a long time ago. Ah, you are right. After everyone had calmed Hu Songshan down, they began to discuss it noisily again. The most troublesome part of this was that the succubus did not have any evil intentions. They could not just kill people. As for the love between a man and a woman, that was human nature. Could they force everyone not to take a concubine? Just as the group of Confucian scholars were in a dilemma, a handsome and tall figure floated into the hall. That person was wearing green clothes. He had a calm smile on his face, but his eyes looked very old. He was the type of person that was most attractive to women. Martial Uncle Lin. Martial Uncle Lin. Someone saw the green-clothed man and quickly greeted him. Lin Ling nodded in greeting along the way and directly arrived before Hu Songshan. At this moment, the latter instead struggled to stand up and bowed meticulously. Songshan greets Martial Uncle Lin. No need, no need. Lin Ling showed a helpless expression. Old man, you might be older than me. Why do you always care about these empty formalities? Then, without waiting for Hu Songshan's reply, he added, Your Shizuan has sent me a letter. I'll move out in 2 days. You should also take a look. Lin Ling passed the letter to Hu Songshan. It was Fang Chaoyun's response after receiving the news. After all, no one could stop Lin Ling from taking a concubine. Asking him to move out was the best solution. Of course, it was not suitable for Hu Songshan to say it. Fang Chaoyun did not have this concern. Hu Songshan read it quickly. His expression finally relaxed. He bowed and said, If that's the case, please forgive us for our poor hospitality, Martial Uncle. Lin Ling waved his hands. He was not willing to stay with this group of scholars. Even if no one dared to control him, it was still an eyesore to see these people do things so rigidly. Another person next to him asked, Martial Uncle, won't Master come back for a while? These women are of unknown origins. I'm afraid. What's there to not know about? Lin Ling sneered instead. This is obviously Ji Yunan's doing. In terms of dimensional warfare, even 10 of him are not a match for your master. Of course he has to play these little tricks. He paused for a moment and said, Senior Martial Brother is right not to fall for it. If he comes back at this time, he will be falling for the enemy's trick. The scholars came to a realization. Most of them did not understand military strategy. Otherwise, they would not have stayed in their hometown. They would have gone to the battlefield. Lin Ling understood it very well. However, he did not have a deep understanding of both sides of the war. He could only think with conventional thinking. At dawn on the next day, Lin Ling led a formidable group out of Terpsichore Academy while surrounded by a group of succubi. Apart from the 10 succubi that he took as concubines, there were a few more candidates. They were obviously the harem reserves. Lin Ling has left. Zhuang Xian stood in the corner of the street and watched Lin Ling's group leave. He said in a low voice, "Next, we can set up a part of the formation in the academy. As long as Fang Chaoyun did not return, the situation would remain dark. No one would think that there was a problem in the academy." Zhuang Xian slowly retracted his gaze and shook his head. "Unfortunately, the succubi's level is too low. Otherwise, we would have a greater chance of affecting Lin Ling." Chapter 466. Read. It's not that simple. Ji Yunan could not help but laugh. It's only because her level is too low that Lin Ling can take a concubine so easily. Otherwise, she would have been captured and interrogated long ago. Succubi were one of the most common demon races in the abyss. Common usually meant ordinary. Their individual strength was indeed not strong. Only a few of them could reach Tier 3. However, succubi were very talented when it came to love. Their bodies had super recovery abilities, which allowed them to have super long combat power. At the same time, their natural desires made them the best sex partners. It was because of such unique existences that Pure Wildness City once fell into chaos. Some men brought a succubus home for free. After tasting the sweetness, they ignored everything else and insisted on taking a concubine. In the end, it caused family discord and chaos. There were also people who took the opportunity to capture succubi, keeping a few for themselves and selling the rest at a high price to others, making a huge fortune without any cost. There were also people who traded their succubi with others or sold them directly after they got tired of playing with them. In this series of processes, none of the succubi resisted. Even if they were sold by their masters for money, they would still quickly cater to their new masters. They were definitely the most qualified personal maids. In fact, this was the norm in the abyss. The succubi were already used to it. However, when this trend quickly spread, Pure Wildness City and even the entire astral plane were greatly affected. People started to feel proud of having a succubus as a slave. If they did not have one, they would find a way to disguise it with a human. There were even people who went to the front lines to buy succubi. It could only be said that there would always be people who would do what was profitable in this world. However, these things had nothing to do with Ji Yunan and the others. Ji Yunan originally only wanted to use the succubus army to disrupt Pure Wildness Academy. He did not expect it to be so effective. Even Lin Ling was forced to leave, so they could more easily set up the array. In the next 3 days, Ji Yunan stayed in Pure Wildness City. He entered Pure Wildness Academy every night and personally set up the array. After the first array was set up, Ji Yunan took out the skeleton from the second floor of the evil god temple and placed it at the eye of the array. Thus, an inexplicable connection began to appear between the formation and the skeleton. Even if the skeleton was taken away, this connection would not be severed. Let's go, there's still 998 left. Ji Yunan curled his lips and said, 999 grand arrays. Although it sounded very impressive, in reality, it was extremely complicated to do. Fortunately, when the first large formation was being set up, the other large formations had already begun their preliminary work. This meant that Ji Yunan only needed to go around and activate it. He didn't need to wait for 3 days at each location. With Ji Yunan and Zhuang Xian's realms, distance was completely negligible. They would be able to rush over as soon as they broke through space. However, they also knew that they were in a hurry for the upcoming battle. It was also quite impossible to set up thousands of great formations without leaving any flaws in any of them. Once the Terpsichore's internal department noticed it, they would have to finish setting up the formation as soon as possible. Senior brother who? There's also a report from the academy saying that there are suspicious people wandering around. A disciple came up to Hu Songshan and reported. This is already the 6th in the past 2 days. The wrinkles on Hu Songshan's old face were almost squeezed together. Did any of the academies find out anything about them? The disciple shook his head. Not yet, but the Beifeng Academy did follow the clues and found an underground formation. The Beifeng Academy was not far from Terpsichore City. It was a military academy, and most of its disciples went to the battlefield. Thus, the management of the Beifeng Academy was extremely strict. They were the least affected by the succubus incident, and they were also the most vigilant. Hu Songshan was surprised. What formation? Their use is not yet known. The disciple shook his head. But according to them, the formation was set up not long ago. It's not an ancient formation. For some reason, Hu Songshan suddenly felt uneasy. He said decisively, "Get Beifeng to send a formation map over immediately." For a large dimension like Terpsichore City, long-distance communication was naturally not difficult. The Beifeng Academy's dean, Hai Tong, received the news very quickly. Formation map. Hai Tong looked at the reply with some surprise. He felt that elder who was making a mountain out of a molehill. Someone had set up a formation under the academy. This sounded very scary, but Hai Tong had confidence in his academy. Forget it. Since elder who has personally asked, just make a copy of the formation map and send it over, Hai Tong said to his subordinates without thinking too much. Yes, Dean. Making a copy of the formation map required time, and Hai Tong did not stay idle. He decided to examine the formation map. This should be a formation passed down from ancient times, and it had been modified in modern times. The other party seemed to be intentionally hiding the use of the formation map, and many of the modifications were made to make it more obvious. Hai Tong was also a knowledgeable person. When he calmed down and slowly examined the formation map, he discovered that something was wrong. This formation seems to be a part of the main formation, but it's also a part of other formations. Hai Tong did not dare to be negligent. If his guess was correct, then the person who set up the formation was definitely not some petty thief. They probably had some ulterior motives. Go to the main courtyard and get someone here immediately. Also, inform Elder Hu. Here, where are the people? Where did they all run off to? Hai Tong ordered his subordinates, but there was no response for a long time. He could not help but turn his head angrily. Then, what entered his eyes was an unexpected person. You have a good eye. Ji Yunan's faint laughter echoed underground. In the next moment, the dean of Beifeng Academy's head flew into the air and fell heavily to the side. After the formation was discovered, the people of the Celestial Society had naturally been monitoring this place. Seeing that Hai Tong was about to discover the final secret, they could only ask him to shut his mouth forever. Zhuang Xian's figure slowly walked out from the shadows behind Ji Yunan. He said in a deep voice, "Only about a third of the formation has been completed. It's really impossible to completely hide it." Ji Yunan did not feel anything and said casually, "Since we've already been discovered, inform everyone to speed up at all costs. There's no need to think about hiding." Hearing this, Zhuang Xian could not help but frown. "It's not like we don't have any other ways. It's too late," Ji Yunan said calmly. Zhuang Xian looked at him doubtfully. Senior's astral world. There was no need to doubt Fang Chaoyun's ability, but it might not be too fast for him to take down Ji Yunan's astral world so quickly. Not to mention that Ji Yunan and Zhong Qinghe were secretly helping him. Just the military equipment alone was enough for Fang Chaoyun to put in a lot of effort. However, Ji Yunan shook his head and said, "The person who is most unsuitable to discover me has finally discovered me." At the edge of the heavenly realm, a beam of holy light descended from an extremely far distance. Chapter 467. Read. Austin. Song Fei's voice came from the void, and his figure slowly appeared. The holy light stopped, and Austin's figure appeared. This Lord of Light and Justice was slender, almost 2 meters tall. He wore a pale golden holy light robe, but his face was typical of a Westerner. During the battle, Song Fei left everything to Fang Chaoyun, and sat quietly in the void, to monitor the movements of the 13 lords. However, in order to do this, it took up all his energy, and he could not spare any time to pay attention to the battle. "I didn't expect you to be the first." Song Fei's eyes were filled with curiosity. It was impossible for Song Fei not to know about this Lord of Light, who was known as the only 15th-tier god in the world, and who dominated the entire Pantheon world. However, he was only curious as to why Austin would appear first, and he did not feel much fear. 4 peak existences like them, levels only meant a difference in quantity, but what determined victory or defeat was often the difference in quality. Austin had been able to support the light god system all by himself, not because of his level, but because of the power of the 2 top laws of light and justice at the same time. I'm not here for the battle. Austin shook his head. My sister, Sylvia, has been trapped by your people. Song Fei was stunned, and instinctively asked, who did it? I don't know yet. Austin's gaze was cold. After entering, I'll find her in 3 days at most. Song Fei fell silent. If he allowed Austin to enter now, and he attacked Shi Daotian, there would be no need for this battle to continue. However, since Austin had already given this reason, it was obvious that he had to go through with it. The ruler slowly appeared in front of Song Fei, and he did not want to talk anymore. However, he did not expect Austin to react faster. The moment the ruler appeared, the holy light had already shot out, and collided with Song Fei's ruler. Light. Endless light. True light was far from what people thought it was. It only had a holy and gentle side, but it also had a unique domineering side. It suppressed everything, and assimilated everything. There was nothing the holy light could not purify. This was the true nature of the holy light. This was the first time Song Fei had fought against Austin, but he had witnessed the domineering power of the strongest god in just one exchange. It was as if the omnipresent holy light had knocked him down and squeezed out a path. However, just as the holy light was about to rush over, a clear light began to flash above. A horsetail whisk swept out from the void, directly brushing down the holy light. The myriad heavens isn't a place you can barge into just because you want to. Yu Lian looked at Austin coldly. She flicked the horsetail whisk in her right hand, and it landed on her left elbow. What an annoying light. A voice rang out behind Austin. After that, it was as if the underworld river was flowing in reverse, and the 9 hells were pouring down from the sky. A young man in black daoist robes pursed his lips. He had appeared out of nowhere and was already standing on top of Austin's head. One of the 13 heavens, Qin Guanruo of the netherworld heaven. Austin was a god, yet he wanted to force his way into the worlds of the heavens. This was a huge taboo. 2 of the 13 heavens Dao-fusing cultivators had appeared in the blink of an eye. Qin Guan looked like a ghost descending from the sky. A ray of light suddenly lit up before it could reach him. It was as if the boundless holy light was spreading out. It was as if the earth was holding up the sky, pushing back all the ghosts. 2 completely different laws kept colliding and dissipating, giving rise to shock waves that were powerful enough to destroy everything. However, those who could stay here at this time were all Dao-fusing cultivators. Of course, they wouldn't be affected by this shockwave. However, the collision of the 2 forces caused all the auras in the surroundings to be covered. The 3 Dao-fusing cultivators didn't notice that a ray of holy light had quietly separated and was rapidly shooting toward the myriad heavens. By the time they noticed it, it was already too late to stop it. Even Austin didn't have any intention of clashing head-on with the 3 Dao-fusing cultivators. However, he had achieved his goal. It's a clone. This was his goal from the beginning. Yu Lian's eyes narrowed slightly. She only needed to take one look at that ray of holy light to understand what Austin was doing. The Dongshu Heaven had always regarded itself as an orthodox Dao sect and was the leader of all the sects in the heavens. Therefore, they had to stand up at this time. It seems that he's telling the truth, Qin Guan said from the side. If it was just a clone, it wouldn't be able to cause much damage. Once it appeared, they could easily subdue it. There was nothing to worry about. Austin had specially come here not to greet them, but to send a clone over. It was most likely true that his younger sister was missing. Yu Lian said, since he's not here for the war, let him be. Song Fei, that disciple of yours doesn't even care about the war now? Song Fei frowned and quickly looked into his astral boundary. Sure enough, he didn't see Fang Chaoyun. He took a closer look. Comrade Fang was waiting with Ji Yunan. How impudent. The corners of Song Fei's mouth twitched slightly, and he couldn't help but scold him. A moment later, Fang Chaoyun hurried into Shi Daotian and saw Song Fei standing there with a sullen face. His junior brother, Tang Jie, was standing behind him with a bitter expression, showing that he wanted to help but couldn't. Master. Fang Chaoyun was like a primary school student who had done something wrong. He carefully walked up to Song Fei. You still know to come here? Why didn't you wait until the war was over? Song Fei didn't give Fang Chaoyun a chance to speak at all. Song Fei had been keeping an eye on the 13 main gods and didn't dare to be distracted for even a second, for fear that someone would secretly attack them. In the end, the time that he had fought so hard for was used by Comrade Fang to deal with Ji Yunan. How could Song Fei not be angry? Fang Chaoyun didn't dare to argue and could only listen with his head lowered. When he was about to explain the situation, his expression changed abruptly. Master, this is bad. Sylvia didn't know how long she had been locked up. All she could come into contact with was darkness. She couldn't make any movements, and all the laws of nature were restricted. She could only try to use her divine body to wear down the shadow laws that bound her. She didn't know how long it would take for her to get out of here, but this was the only thing she could do. Whenever Sylvia's divine body was exhausted and she had to stop to rest, she couldn't help but wonder if her brother would notice that she was missing. If he did, would he be able to find her? If she could do it all over again, she would definitely go to the Holy Light Nation every day to ensure that she would be discovered as soon as she went missing. Unfortunately, Sylvia suddenly felt that something was emitting a faint light in front of her chest. It was a pendant, and in this boundless darkness, it was like a holy light. Chapter 468. Read. Something big had happened in the pure fleeting heaven. Almost all the academies in the pure fleeting heaven had been attacked. Powerful enemies had appeared out of nowhere and conquered all the academies in the blink of an eye. More and more powerful beings were descending from all directions, quickly invading the pure fleeting heaven and setting up spell formations everywhere. The moment the enemies entered the pure fleeting heaven, Lin Ling, who had been invited by Fang Chaoyun to guard the academy, immediately rushed to the scene. He slashed his sword horizontally, and a terrifying sword intent kept all the enemies outside the academy. However, he had no intention of continuing his attack. Instead, he looked up at the sky with a solemn expression. Uncle Master Lin, the invaders have arrived. Please help us. Uncle Master Lin, if there's anything you need our help with, please let us know. Uncle Master Lin, these must be people sent by that Ji Yunan. Shut up, all of you. Lin Ling's expression was one of annoyance, and his scolding caused all the Confucian scholars to lose their voices. He didn't send people. He came in person. As the Star Lord, Fang Chaoyun was naturally the first to know about the situation in the pure fleeting heaven. Song Fei could also see the situation at a glance, and he couldn't help but frown. Go back and take care of things first, then come back. Fang Chaoyun didn't have time to say anything else. He hurriedly nodded and left for his star realm. He didn't think that Ji Yunan would be so daring as to attack the pure fleeting heaven. He was already the most powerful being below the Dao integration stage. Even Shui Ren had to retreat in his star realm. Where did Ji Yunan get his courage from? Fang Chaoyun was enraged, and he quickly entered the spatial passageway. Traveling through space also required time. Before Fang Chaoyun arrived, the situation in the pure fleeting heaven had already taken a turn for the worse. Lin Ling knew about Ji Yunan's fearsome reputation, and he didn't dare to be careless. He only used his sword intent to protect the academy, and he didn't even consider going out. However, to his surprise, Ji Yunan didn't plan to hide himself at all. He just revealed himself and walked into the academy. We didn't have much time, and we just barely managed to set up the spell formations. We still need Senior to take charge of the spell formations, Zhuangxian said next to Ji Yunan. Ji Yunan only nodded and didn't say anything. He took a step forward, and then he'd already arrived within the Pure Grace Academy. Ji Yunan. When Lin Ling saw his figure, he couldn't help but shout, if you dare to behave atrociously in the Terpsichore sky, Senior Brother Fang will be back soon. At that time, Lin Ling hadn't finished speaking when his voice stopped abruptly. That was because Ji Yunan's figure had already descended in front of him, and Ji Yunan casually twisted his head off. With Ji Yunan's current Tier 10 evil god physique, just his physical strength and speed had already reached an unbelievable level. He only used his body to move, and to others, it would look like he was teleporting. Moreover, his power could easily destroy a Star Lord, so there was no way he could resist. Hu Songzhen stood next to Lin Ling. He watched as Ji Yunan appeared out of nowhere and his uncle master, who was standing with a sword, slowly fell down. He couldn't say a word. In the next moment, Ji Yunan's figure suddenly disappeared again. He had gone underground to set up the core of the control formation. As for Hu Songzhen and the other Confucian scholars, they would naturally be dealt with by Zhuang Xian's people. The formation beneath the Pure Grace Academy was the true core of all the formations, and it was also where the power of the blood sacrifice gathered. Ji Yunan put down the blood-colored skull, and a faint red glow appeared on both sides of the skull. Then, it quickly shot into the skull. Meanwhile, all the living beings in the Pure Grace City could clearly feel a strange power descending upon them. It was as if something was already surging in their bodies, wanting to break out of them. And in a latitude that they couldn't see, the threads of life were continuously being pulled out and gathered underground. Some of the living beings with shorter lifespans were even showing signs of rapid aging, and in the blink of an eye, they had reached the end of their lives. This strange phenomenon quickly caused panic. Those who had the ability to leave the Pure Grace City had long since fled as if they were taking refuge, leaving behind only ordinary people with insufficient strength. At this moment, Fang Chaoyun finally arrived. With a single glance, he saw the entire Pure Grace sky, and he almost blacked out. This was too much. This Ji Yunan wasn't just here to cause trouble. He actually wanted to sacrifice the entire Pure Grace City. Fang Chaoyun was filled with regret and hatred. If he hadn't been blinded by hatred and personally went to the front lines, he wouldn't have given Ji Yunan such a chance. Die! With a loud shout, a huge Dai character appeared in mid-air and landed in the sky above the Pure Grace Academy. Deep underground, Ji Yunan slowly opened his eyes. Looking at the formation on the ground that had become as red as blood, he finally smiled. Song Fei and Austin are both here. Fortunately, I came prepared. He stepped out of the range of the formation, grabbed a pillar out of thin air, and pressed it directly into the ground. You're lucky. Make some space for old Fang. As Ji Yunan's voice fell, the original world in the Pearl of the God Nation quickly dissipated and returned to its original position. Meanwhile, a new vortex started to form in the Pearl. In the next moment, Ji Yunan's figure suddenly disappeared, and he appeared in mid-air, facing the Dai character that was descending from above. Less than 2 years had passed, and Ji Yunan stood before Fang Chaoyun again. However, he was no longer the same as before. Fang Chaoyun didn't hold back this time. That single character was imbued with the massive power of the Star Realm. Even a 10th-level powerhouse would have to dodge it temporarily. It could be said that there were almost no people below the Dao integration stage who could contend against him. However, Ji Yunan was one of them. Ji Yunan didn't make any unnecessary movements. He raised his hand and punched toward the sky, hitting the Dai character right in the middle. A head-on collision. Ji Yunan's choice was unexpected, and so was the outcome. The fist and the character collided, and the terrifying impact almost sent the entire Pure Grace Academy flying. However, Ji Yunan's figure seemed to be unaffected, and he leaped out of the impact at an extremely fast speed. After all, Fang Chaoyun was someone who had lived for tens of thousands of years. Even though he was extremely furious, he didn't lose his basic vigilance. The moment Ji Yunan suddenly appeared, he had already sensed that something was wrong. He wrote 6 defend characters consecutively, and they floated around his body to defend against possible attacks. It was a pity that he had to face Ji Yunan, who had already reached the 10th level. He was a strange being that Yang Xiaoxiao said was unprecedented. Another punch landed, and Fang Chaoyun felt as if a world was crushing down on him. The 6 defend characters couldn't even defend for an instant, and they were annihilated as soon as they came into contact with the fist. Fang Chaoyun had imbued the power of his star realm, but they were completely annihilated. Could it be that a Dao integration stage powerhouse had secretly attacked him? Once he was distracted, it would be difficult for him to escape from Ji Yunan's hands. Ji Yunan's movements were as smooth as flowing water. At the same time that his fist broke through Fang Chaoyun's defenses, his other fist had already landed on Fang Chaoyun's abdomen. Just as this lightning-fast fist was about to land, an aura suddenly soared through the air. The ruler finally fell from the void, and its target was Ji Yunan's chest. However, Ji Yunan didn't retreat. Instead, he increased his speed, and he was actually going to take the attack of a Dao integration stage powerhouse head-on. Chapter 469. Reading. Dao integration and those below Dao integration were two completely different realms. In a sense, becoming a Star Lord was a leap in one's life essence, while Dao integration was another. Furthermore, this leap was even greater. There had never been a precedent of an ordinary Star Lord challenging a Dao integration cultivator. Even the most talented Star Lord in history had only managed to escape from a Dao integration cultivator. The last person who had accomplished such a feat was Li Ci, who was in charge of one of the 13 heavens, the Dharma Heaven. Li Ci was famous for his Dharma Heaven, which referred to how he had managed to escape from a Dao integration cultivator by relying on his endless and cunning nomological laws when he was still an ordinary Star Lord. What Ji Yunan was going to do now was something even more terrifying. He was going to take an attack from a Dao integration cultivator. The ruler fell without any obstruction and hit Ji Yunan's chest. This attack was like the combined force of heaven and earth. It completely exceeded this level of power, and even the body of the evil god could not resist it. Ji Yunan's chest cracked instantly. It was as if a cannonball had landed on his chest, creating a huge hole in his body. However, even such an injury could not stop Ji Yunan's punch from landing. Fang Chaoyun had to die. In Fang Chaoyun's eyes, Ji Yunan's figure was enlarging at an unbelievable speed. Then, the fist landed in front of him. An indescribable power surged over like a tide. Fang Chaoyun felt something explode in his body, and his consciousness dissipated. Ji Yunan's fist was also like a cannonball. Furthermore, it was a cannonball filled with gunpowder. One punch caused Fang Chaoyun's entire body to explode, and blood and flesh rained down from the sky. The power of the astral realm can only strengthen nomological laws. It's still too weak. Ji Yunan retracted his fist and shook his head gently. Meanwhile, the injury on his chest was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye, as if the ruler had never landed on him. In the next moment, Song Fei's figure appeared in front of him, and he looked at Ji Yunan with an unprecedented solemn gaze. I should have killed you back then. He did not hide his thoughts at all. However, Song Fei did not attack again. He knew that the previous attack had not killed Ji Yunan, and it was even more impossible for him to kill him now. Putting aside the fact that Ji Yunan could already escape, just the scene just now was enough for old man Zi Luo to step in and protect Ji Yunan. It was impossible for him to make a move on him. A Star Lord who could withstand an attack from a Dao integration cultivator would almost certainly advance. The only difference was how long it would take. Ji Yunan shrugged and didn't answer. Song Fei's early appearance was indeed somewhat unexpected. However, according to the original plan, after killing Fang Chaoyun, it would be impossible to hide it from Song Fei. The blood sacrifice operation had already entered the final stage, and Ji Yunan had already made plans to deal with them. Song Fei stared at Ji Yunan for a while and suddenly said, "Did Austin come for you?" Hey, don't put all the blame on me," Ji Yunan said with a dissatisfied expression, and he didn't seem to be lying at all. Hey, don't put the blame on me, Ji Yunan said with dissatisfaction. He did not look like he was lying. Song Fei nodded. Then, he raised the ruler again and pointed it at Ji Yunan. Even if he could not kill him, he still had to do what he had to do. This time, Ji Yunan did not resist. Instead, he disappeared instantly. He wandered between the shadows and reality. However, this method of using the laws was not worth mentioning in the eyes of a Dao integration cultivator. Song Fei turned the ruler and whipped Ji Yunan out of the void. This time, he hit Ji Yunan's neck, causing almost half of his head to explode. However, this was still not a fatal injury. The next moment, boundless purple light descended from the sky. It dyed the entire sky purple and pressed down on Song Fei. Song Fei shook his head and sighed. He knew that he had no chance. He disappeared before the purple light landed. At the same time, Elder Zi Luo appeared beside Ji Yunan. Austin said that you're called the evil god over there. Elder Zi Luo looked at Ji Yunan with a smile. Ji Yunan could not help but raise his eyebrows. He's already met you. Elder Zi Luo nodded. He brought Sylvia here to meet all the Dao integration cultivators here. However, Song Fei hasn't had time to meet him because of Fang Chaoyun. After a pause, the elder smiled again. Since Song Fei asked me that earlier, it's most likely because someone sent him a message. Ji Yunan nodded in silence. When he looked back at his god's kingdom, Sylvia had indeed disappeared. Austin was Austin after all. He did not even need 3 days to find the target. He did not even need 6 hours. He saved Sylvia quietly without attacking the evil god temple. It was most likely because he did not want to alert the enemy. Did he want to join forces with the Dao integration cultivators here to capture him? As if reading Ji Yunan's mind, Elder Zi Luo stroked his beard. He used the excuse that you're the common enemy of the gods to ask us to cooperate and kill you. Of course, we refused. Ji Yunan finally raised his head in confusion. He was used to being hunted by the entire world after his identity was exposed. He had not gotten used to it yet. This time, Elder Zi Luo did not speak. Another voice came from behind him. What does being the common enemy of the gods have to do with us? You're the common enemy of the gods, which means you're the firmest supporter of the heavens. The leader of the Dao sect, Yu Lian, walked out slowly and looked at Ji Yunan. I look forward to the day you fuse the Dao. Brother, Ji Yunan is the evil god. He'll definitely destroy the entire world. Why don't those idiots understand? Sylvia followed behind Austin as they made their way back to the Pantheon world. She could not help but complain. Ever since Austin rescued her, he had kept her by his side. He did not leave her behind even when he met with the Dao integration cultivators. Thus, Sylvia witnessed the I refuse attitude of the Dao integration cultivators. They did not believe Austin at all. None of the 13 Dao integration cultivators were willing to help. They clearly knew how dangerous Ji Yunan was, but they could not kill him when he was still weak. This kind of idiotic teammate made Sylvia furious, especially when she had been trapped for so long. Austin had only come with a clone. His true strength was barely comparable to a Star Lord. However, he could still control the light laws, which was why he could rescue Sylvia. If his main body had come, he would have killed Ji Yunan with a single slap. He would not have needed anyone's help. There are no legends of the evil god in the god's world. Austin's expression was cold as he gave the standard answer. Then, he shook his head. If I knew it was an evil god, I would have taken the opportunity to break through even if I had to force my way through. He had only wanted to send a clone over to find his sister after discovering that Sylvia had gone missing. Who knew things would be so complicated? Then what do we do now? Sylvia asked anxiously. Go back, the god of light and justice said. Then, fight back and kill him. Chapter 470. Read. After Song Fei left, no one could interfere with Ji Yunan's blood sacrifice anymore. However, just in case, the pearl of the divine nation that he had put down earlier still came into play. The entire terpsichore was sucked into it, and the main body of the blood sacrifice was completed in the pearl. Duan Wanchi, who had been sealed in the pearl and couldn't get out, escaped. In order to make space for the terpsichore, he was released by Ji Yunan. Even Yarrow Luosha had returned to his original position. After Fang Chaoyun died and Ji Yunan took away the terpsichore, he could finally wait for the blood sacrifice to be completed and then take out the blood-colored skull. In other words, Ji Yunan only needed to stay at home and wait for the second stage upgrade to be completed. While Ji Yunan was lying down and waiting for the second stage upgrade, the 13 Dao integration cultivators met again. Zi Luo was still not there, but the attitude of the 13 heavens was different from before. The previous meeting of the Dao integration cultivators was to deal with the possible war between the two worlds. This time, it was for the possible new members. That's right, Zi Luo, who could only exist for 10 years, was not recognized by these people for the time being. On the other hand, they believed that Ji Yunan, who had displayed shocking power, would definitely advance to the Dao integration cultivator. Have you seen him? Zhu Jiming was still the first to speak as he stared at Yu Lian, who had just appeared. Yu Lian, who had personally seen Ji Yunan's rapid advancement, undoubtedly had the most right to speak. As for Song Fei, because he had been tricked earlier, Zhu Jiming wished he could just ignore this person. Yu Lian didn't mind. She nodded and said, "The advancement aura on his body is already very obvious. He also has some characteristics of the Dao integration cultivator." Yu Lian naturally saw through the unconcealable, strange, and twisted aura on Ji Yunan's body. Gods might only be able to see the strangeness, but the Dao integration cultivators from the heavenly worlds had a different view. They had no prejudice against the evil god and only saw it as a special path. There were 3,000 great Daos, and all of them could be Dao integration. As soon as Yu Lian finished speaking, the other 12 Dao integration cultivators all had different expressions. Qin Guan walked up to Song Fei and shook his head. He had a good personal relationship with Song Fei, but he was here to persuade him to stop. If he lost his disciple, he could nurture him again. If he stubbornly insisted on fighting with Ji Yunan, it would only result in a lose-lose situation. Song Fei waved his hand to indicate that he was fine. Obviously, he could accept this. Almost every Dao integration stage cultivator's progression was not smooth sailing, and they would more or less clash with other powers. When Song Fei was promoted, he stepped on the shoulders of old man Zi Luo. Now it was just a natural cycle. As for power, Yu Lian paused for a moment and said, "In the prehistoric times, the Dao sect called those who fused the Dao saints. I think it's time to set up another half-saint realm with Ji Yunan as a benchmark. Since that's the case, are we just going to ignore Austin?" The one who spoke was the Milky Way celestial Sai Yun. He was one of the Dao integration stage cultivators who viewed the gods with hostility. His Milky Way celestial Sai Yun focused on both metaphysics and technology, and attached great importance to the excavation of the wisdom of mortals. Thus, he scoffed at the beliefs of the gods. He said that Ji Yunan is the common enemy of the gods. "If we don't hand him over, I'm afraid a real battle will be unavoidable," Song Fei said. He had already understood what Austin was talking about. On the other side, Lu Wen sneered and said, "If they want to fight, then let's fight. If we give whoever they want, where will we put our faces?" Regardless of whether there was a personal grudge, directly lowering their heads and handing over a person was a disgrace to the entire world. Immediately after, a few others spoke up, and the gist of it was similar to Lu Wen. Putting aside whether Ji Yunan could advance or not, it was impossible for the gods to take him away with just a word. Finally, Yu Lian looked around and said, "Then it's decided." While the Dao integration stage cultivators were discussing Ji Yunan, the major powers of the universe were also astonished by his magnificent feat this time. There had never been an ordinary Star-Lord who could completely destroy a Star-Lord like Fang Chaoyun with a single punch when he had the support of his star realm. There had never been an ordinary Star-Lord who could directly withstand 2 attacks from a Dao integration stage cultivator and still be completely fine afterwards. The specific contents of the Dao integration stage cultivators conference were naturally not announced to the public. However, Yu Lian's evaluation of Ji Yunan's strength had somehow spread. Thus, the saying that there was another half-sage realm between the peak Star-Lords and the Dao integration stage began to spread among the people. Using the power of one person to forcibly create a new realm. This guy is really impressive. Within the extreme sword heaven, Xue Ren was leisurely sipping a cup of tea as he spoke with a faint smile. Even though he was speaking words of envy, there was no emotion in his tone. There was only calmness. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress was still here. Seeing Xue Ren's expression, she could not help but ask, "You don't seem surprised." "Of course I'm not surprised." Xue Ren smiled and pointed at the wound on his chest. "I'm the first person to witness this half-sage realm." The Grand Sage Immortal Empress was silent for a long time. As if she felt that Xue Ren's words were a bit too disrespectful, she could not help but say, "Without reaching Dao integration, the half-sage realm is just a joke." She then raised her head to look at Shui Ren. This injury will allow you to rest and properly consider the matter of Tao integration. Hurry up and go into seclusion. Don't waste time. Shui Ren shook his head and smiled. I'm already in seclusion. In the star realm, the young girl, No Return, rushed to Red and advised her to temporarily leave the star realm and hide herself. In the paradise heaven, the first thing Yu Lian did after returning to the star realm was to send someone to inform Dao Lord Wu Tian not to consider becoming enemies with Ji Yunan. Lu Wen, Duan Wenqi, the Heavenly Deity Society. After this incident, all of Ji Yunan's old enemies and friends completely changed their attitudes toward Ji Yunan. Even Dao integration stage cultivators could not kill him. This meant that as long as Ji Yunan did not throw away his life, he would be able to reach Dao integration sooner or later. In the world of gods, the first thing Austin did after returning was to inform all of the lords of the evil god. Unlike the Dao integration stage cultivators next door, all of the lords took the existence of the evil god very seriously, almost to the point of life and death. This was because in the ancient legends of the world of gods, the first lord of the primordial era was the god of creation. He created the world, but he also created the evil god. The evil gods had come to destroy the world. Even the god of creation himself had chosen to sacrifice himself in order to seal the extremely powerful evil gods. The evil god of the primordial era actually reincarnated into the world of gods. Eugene, the lord of war, frowned. He was very warlike, but that did not mean that he did not understand how difficult it would be for them to be separated from the world of gods. But the evil god must die, the Lady of Darkness, Daisy, said resolutely. Of course. However, the Lord of Nightmares chuckled and said, before that, I want to share some new discoveries with all of you. Perhaps we can use them to do something. As the Lord of Nightmares' voice fell, an image slowly appeared in front of everyone. This was a scene of a group of people infiltrating a certain divine kingdom to steal the power of faith. What do these fellows from the world of gods need the power of faith for? Daphne, the goddess of nature, asked with a frown. Chapter 471. Reading. What was Ji Yunan, who had once again become the center of the storm, doing? He was sitting calmly in his own divine kingdom, watching as the startling heavens in the divine kingdom Pearl was continuously sacrificed into streams of blood qi, which were then sent into the blood-colored skull. Ji Yunan had thought that the blood sacrifice process would be completed very quickly, but reality proved that the blood sacrifice spell formation, which was completed in a hurry, was ultimately flawed. Even though Fang Chaoyun was already dead, the people of the startling heavens did not lower their heads and await their deaths. Instead, they upheld the spirit of the Confucian scholars of constantly striving to become stronger, thinking of ways to survive the blood sacrifice. When the world collapsed, they would migrate to a more stable area. When ferocious beasts ran amok, they would think of ways to hunt them down, leaving a piece of land for ordinary people to live on. These people who were lucky enough to survive the blood sacrifice, or rather, those who had not yet had their turn to be sacrificed, displayed astonishing vitality. Such a scene was very similar to how the human race in ancient times had overcome obstacles and sought a path of survival among the myriad races. But it was of no use. The startling heavens trapped in the divine kingdom Pearl could not possibly escape the fate of being completely sacrificed, because no one could save them. Ever since Ji Yunan came to this world, the string in his heart that had always been tight could finally be loosened a little. As long as he completed the second transition, there would be very few people in this world who could truly threaten his life. Even if he were to face an ultimate expert like Austin, Ji Yunan was quite confident that he could escape with his life, and might not even suffer too many injuries. In fact, his current living conditions were already much better than in the game. A considerable number of players in the game chose to secretly build their divine kingdom, even building it in the depths of void space, not wanting to be discovered by the main gods. The reason was that after the second transition, it was very difficult for players to hide their identities, and it was almost inevitable that they would be discovered. And once they became the public enemy, the players would have to face the pursuit of all the gods, becoming the target of scorn. They would have to pay attention to hiding themselves at all times. It could be said that from the second transition onwards, the difficulty of the game began to show, and it suddenly became a game of concealment. Players had to hide their tracks while hunting down the various gods, and at the same time, continue to spread evil and eventually break out of the game. However, things were different for Ji Nan now. The existence of the heavenly planes gave him the perfect environment to live in. If the gods wanted to chase after him, it wouldn't be easy. It's time to consider the matters after the second transition. The blood sacrifice would require around half a month before it could be completely completed, so Ji Nan's thoughts moved elsewhere. Although the myriad worlds had allowed him to develop more stably, it had also affected his advancement after the second transition. There were pros and cons to this. After a player's second job transition, their accumulated points would gradually be removed from the system of self-advancement, and they could only be used for the construction of their divine kingdom. Their sin points would then become the main basis for leveling up. The core of obtaining sin points had not changed, but the methods of obtaining sin points had become more varied. But no matter what, Big Head was definitely related to the gods. It was inconvenient to be in the heavenly realms. While Ji Nan was deep in thought, Yang Xiaoxiao's voice came from the side and interrupted his thoughts. "Teacher, there's a Dao integration expert coming to the divine kingdom." "No, it's not a Dao integration expert, it's a power that belongs to a Dao integration expert." Yang Xiaoxiao's voice was very urgent, and the situation indeed required her to be urgent. Ji Nan suddenly opened his eyes, and his figure disappeared from the evil god's temple, appearing at the border of the divine kingdom. The power of faith. "No, it's a dream." Ji Nan frowned slightly, and in the blink of an eye, he had already determined the source of this power. He sensed that the power was coming from this direction, and he also discovered its origin. However, it seemed like he could not stop its arrival, because it was purely a nomological power. After all, Ji Nan was still at the 10th stage, and he had not truly completed the second transition. There was a qualitative difference in the nomological power. He could fight against Dao integration experts because of his extremely powerful body, and he did not have any advantage in terms of nomological power. It was as if he was hiding in the shadows, but Song Fei had directly pulled him out with a ruler. Now that the power of a Dao integration expert had descended, and its target was his entire divine kingdom, Ji Nan could only watch helplessly. Fortunately, he only needed to wait for the second transition, and the matter of the divine kingdom was no longer important. Furthermore, this power did not seem to have come to kill him, but had other objectives. The dreamlike power descended from the sky, causing most of the living beings in the divine kingdom to fall into a deep sleep at the same time, and the entire divine kingdom became silent. However, it could be seen that no one had died because of this. Instead, all of them fell into a deep sleep. The nomological power of a Dao integration expert could easily affect a large plane, and it could achieve such a terrifying effect. Of course, Ji Nan did not fall into a deep sleep because of this, but he could not help but be affected by the power of the dream. His thoughts began to slow down, and his body gradually lost control. If someone wanted to attack at this time, it was undoubtedly the best opportunity. Fortunately, the heretic god's body was strong enough, and the power that had already affected Ji Nan's body could be assimilated and eliminated by the heretic god's body. As the power of the dream directly affected one's mind, this process was slowed down, but it still had an effect. By the time Ji Nan regained consciousness, the power of the dream had already completely enveloped the divine kingdom. All the living beings in the divine kingdom were trapped in the dream, and strands of psychic power were continuously gathering. This scene was somewhat similar to Ji Nan's blood sacrifice to the startling sky, except that Ji Nan had taken away lives, while the dream realm only collected psychic power. The process of gathering psychic power was slow and prolonged. As the psychic power gradually gathered, Ji Nan began to sense that something was amiss. Rules were constantly being produced, and wills were beginning to descend. It seemed as if a new life was about to be born. Just as the power of the dream realm descended upon Ji Nan's divine kingdom, the war between the two worlds suddenly entered a white-hot stage. This was a sudden burst of power originating from the world of gods. A large number of high-level gods attacked, catching the heavens unprepared. Even the main gods began to interfere without restraint. The main gods, who were originally rarely seen, could be seen on the front lines almost every other day. Even though they were the ones who made the first move every time, and the fusing ones on the heavens side had the upper hand, making it difficult for them to gain the upper hand. They still enjoyed it. This offensive had been going on for more than 10 days. It seemed as if the gods were really going to put Austin's words into practice before he left. The fusing ones had long since expected this, but they did not expect the gods to act so quickly. After the initial chaos, the fusing ones were able to deal with the situation calmly, and it was very easy for them. After all, they had the upper hand. If the world of gods continued like this, it would only be a waste of the main god's strength. In these short 10 days, 2 main gods had already been injured, and one of them was even gravely injured. It was the overly courageous Lord of War, Eugene. Chapter 472. Read. Just as the fusing masters thought that the gods had gone mad and were trying to kill Ji-Yunan at all costs, the life form in the dream finally awakened. A faint sigh that seemed to come from ancient times rang out in the dream of everyone in the god nation. Almost at the same time, Ji-Yunan opened his eyes. The blood sacrifice of the Terpsichore had also been completed. Due to Fang Chaoyun's death, more than half of the dimension had collapsed, and all the life forms had been sucked dry by Ji-Yunan. It could be said that the Terpsichore no longer existed. When all the life force was gathered on the blood-red skull, it shone with a strange light, and even the God Nation Pearl was dyed blood-red. After all, the God Nation Pearl was just a tool, and had its own limitations. The blood-red skull had clearly exceeded its limits. Ji-Yunan did not hesitate. He took the skull out of the pearl, and walked towards the evil god's palace, heading towards the 2nd floor. As long as he put the blood-red skull back, the second transition would be complete. Outside the god nation, as the woman's sigh rang out, the war between the 2 worlds at the front lines slowed. The dream immortal has returned so soon. Yu Lian raised her eyebrows slightly surprised. The dream immortal's return was uncertain, but it could be roughly confirmed that it would be at least 100 years later. What made her return so early? Yu Lian looked at Lu Wen. The 2 of them happened to be on the same battlefield, and Lu Wen had long since interfered with the dream immortal's return. This was no secret. Lu Wen smiled, and had no intention of hiding anything. He told Yu Lian about how the dream immortal's followers had gone to the world of gods to collect the power of faith in order to help her recover early. Speaking of which, this was all thanks to the previous battle. Lu Wen continued, if not for the deaths of so many gods, it would not have been so easy for them to collect faith. So, the war between the 2 worlds could have been instigated by them? Yu Lian raised her eyebrows. Hard to say. Of course, Lu Wen had suspected this as well, but he still felt that there was something suspicious. The dream immortals return this time. Wait. This is not the dream immortal's power. Lu Wen was taken aback. Turning his head, he realized that the location where the dream immortal had awoken seemed somewhat familiar. The dream immortal had coincidentally returned from Ji-Yunan's divine kingdom, but she had not used her own power. Could this be a coincidence? As if to confirm Lu Wen's guess, a deep purple light shot out from the dream realm, rapidly shooting towards the evil divine palace. After the purple light disappeared, a young girl with a graceful figure slowly appeared and frowned as she looked at the purple light. Plotting against me? No matter who you are. Dream immortal. Another voice came from behind. It was a square-faced man dressed in golden armor. The army destroyer celestial Huokue was the only mortal general in the 13 heavens, and he was the most important ally to Dream Immortal. Back then, in the battle where Meng Xian had almost perished, Huokue was the only one who had stood by her side. Because of this, she had also sustained heavy injuries. If not, Lu Wen would not have had the chance to swap Meng Xian's son. The Dream Immortal lightly nodded towards him and said, "It's been tens of thousands of years, and I don't recognize the heavens anymore." Many things have indeed happened. Huokue sighed. Not counting you, there might be one more here, or perhaps 2 unifying Daos. The Dream Immortal's expression froze. She knew very well what the birth of a unifying Daos entailed, and she also knew how difficult it was to take this step. In reality, although the 2 worlds each had more than 10 such beings, they had all accumulated over countless years. Before the Dream Immortal could ask any more questions, her former followers had already arrived. "We welcome the return of the sect leader." Many Star Lords and World Breakers were dressed in black uniforms, and they all looked at the Dream Immortal with tears in their eyes. They had been loyal followers of the Cloud Dream sect in the past, and they had waited for the return of the sect leader for tens of thousands of years. Towards her former followers, the Dream Immortal still cared a lot. Almost all of them had a private conversation with each of them. But then the leader said in shame, "I am useless." "The young master, I know about this," the Dream Immortal interrupted. "Back then, I personally swapped out 3 babies to deceive others. I did not expect Lu Wen to find out." The Dream Immortal slept in the river of time, and was unaware of what was happening in the outside world. She only knew a little about matters related to Lu Wenying through her life chart. "The person who killed him has been implicated by my mark. I can sense that he is here." The Dream Immortal's expression darkened. "Since he dared to kill my son, he naturally has to pay the price." Halfway through her sentence, she was attracted by a commotion in the distance, and she could not help but stop talking. The purple light in the distance landed on the evil god's temple, and then it shone brightly, transforming into a figure with a supreme aura. A manifestation of dreams? Someone has fused the great Tao of dreams? The Dream Immortal suddenly turned around and asked Hua Kuei. Hua Kuei shook her head slowly. "No, it's the Lord of Nightmares from the world of gods. As for why he can project his power here, I'm afraid he borrowed the power of your resurrection." Just as the two of them were speaking, the Holy Light figure had already wielded the Holy Light longsword, and was slashing towards the evil god's temple. Everything that had happened before was just a smokescreen to distract the attention of the fusing Daos, so that they would not notice the Dream Immortal's return immediately. Once Dream Force was completely activated, Kotsis would borrow its power to send Austin's power over. That was the ultimate goal of the gods. Austin. The Dream Immortal frowned deeply. She was not completely clueless about this core god of light. The person he was going to deal with this time was the fellow who had killed her son. From the perspective of the astral plane, he should only be a top-notch ordinary astral lord. It looked like there was no need for her to make a move. The Dream Immortal's gaze paused for a moment, and then she did not look any further. She had borrowed the telekinesis of this citizen of the astral plane to awaken, and was very clear about the level of this astral lord. However, when the Holy Light Sword descended, another shocking change occurred. The palace seemed to have predicted the Holy Light Sword, and split itself into 2, revealing a human figure in the middle. "Austin, Kotsis." A calm voice came from that person's mouth, and there seemed to be a hint of a smile in it. "I'll pay you a visit when I have the time. As for this time, I'll accept a portion of your godhoods." In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, the 2 core gods had sent out their doppelgangers at the same time. Moreover, these doppelgangers possessed a portion of their own power, and were created from godhood. Austin acted as if he had not heard the other party's words, and the Holy Light Sword descended even faster, as if it was going to slash apart the other party along with the astral plane. The Dream Immortal looked at Hua Kuei in confusion, and asked, "Who is this person?" "A newly ascended astral lord within 10,000 years. Hua Kuei nodded gravely. "A newly ascended Daos within 10,000 years. No, a newly ascended Daos within 100 years. As soon as Hua Kuei finished speaking, Ji Yunan's figure instantly moved. There seemed to be a boundless shadow seething behind him, and it completely swallowed the Holy Light Sword and the power of nightmares. This was a genuine Dao's integration level. Chapter 473. Read. Ji Yunan placed the blood-red skull on the second floor of the evil god's temple, and his second advancement was complete. There were no changes in the world, no signs of unification, and no one even noticed that Ji Yunan had already stepped into the realm of unification. According to the system in the Pantheon world and the game, Ji Yunan was now at the 11th rank. Those who were at the same rank as him were the 2 peak powerhouses who controlled the time law, Lu Wen of the Sky of Time, and Fan Lun, the God of Time. These 2 were juniors among the unification, and were the latest to advance. Of course, Lorenza was also included. However, at this stage, the time of advancement and rank could no longer be used to judge one's strength. Even if Lu Wen was only at the 11th rank, he did not fear Song Fei, who was at the 12th rank. This confidence stemmed from the uniqueness of his laws, as well as the two great Taos he had comprehended during unification. It was the same for Ji Nan. Even if he had just advanced to the 11th rank, he had the confidence to kill two veteran overgod clones. The holy sword slashed heavily at Ji Nan's head, terrifying holy flames burning fiercely, covering Ji Nan's entire body in the blink of an eye. However, Ji Nan continued to charge forward, his speed not slowing down at all. The holy sword could not harm his body, and the holy flames could not effectively burn him. Instead, Ji Nan was getting closer and closer to the holy light shadow and the purple mist. After all, Dream Force had appeared above the evil god's temple, almost at the edge of the astral plane. Austin had also sealed off the space to give himself a path of retreat. But now, Ji Nan was completely relying on his own speed to shorten the distance to a point where he could attack. Austin's clone struck out 3 more times, each strike imbued with scorching holy flames. Even the laws were warped by the holy flames, and then assimilated into boundless light. Even if it was just a clone, the characteristics of the light law did not change. Ji Nan's own shadow law was rapidly assimilated, but he had the advantage of being here in person. The total amount of laws he could use was far greater than his opponent's 2 clones. Shadows rapidly enveloped Austin and cursed clones. Even if they would be assimilated in the blink of an eye, it was enough to buy them some time. What Ji Nan needed was just a little bit of time. One punch. Ji Nan's fist landed heavily, directly piercing through the holy light body of Austin's doppelganger. Sparkling and translucent specks of light scattered around and were instantly swallowed by the shadows. However, Austin did not hesitate at all. With a turn of his hand, his sword descended again, striking Ji Nan's shoulder. But it was still useless. The clone's absolute power was insufficient. Just by relying on the supreme characteristics of the laws of light, it was not enough to harm the evil god's body after the second transition. On the other hand, Ji Nan's fists didn't stop at all. Every punch penetrated Austin's body, and every punch destroyed the laws attached to the doppelganger, exhausting Austin's strength to the greatest extent. Apart from walking the mortal world as a saint, the clones of the gods were essentially a fusion of a portion of godhood and the laws of nature. The separated godhood drove the precepts to act, so the doppelganger could possess the quality of the precepts that was not inferior to the main body, but the total amount was far less, and it did not have the protection of the divine body. Ji Nan was all too familiar with the methods of the gods. Every step he took was the most correct choice. The 2 core god clones in front of him could not do anything more. Just like that, Ji Nan forcefully withstood the attacks of the holy sword. In the short span of half an instant, he threw over 100 punches, turning the holy light doppelganger into a sieve. The holy light collapsed in an instant, swallowed by the omnipresent shadows. The holy flames no longer had the driving force to burn, and soon fell into the shadows. Ji Nan reached out and grabbed a sparkling and translucent object from the collapsed holy light. It was a portion of Austin's godhood. He kept the godhood and shifted his gaze to the thin purple fog at the side. The master of nightmares, Kusisi, the core god who had discovered the actions of the Cloudy Dream sect and personally planned this stowaway, did not even have the intention to say a word. The purple fog quickly escaped into the void. However, as the shadows engulfed him, there was no way for him to turn back. Dream Force could not affect Ji Nan, so he could only watch as his precepts were wiped clean. In a short period of time, Ji Nan already had the incomplete godhood of 2 core gods in his hands. The entire process was as smooth as flowing water, as if he had long been familiar with such a thing. Beside him, Meng Xian and Hua Kuei looked at each other. Even if it was only 2 doppelgangers, they were core god-level doppelgangers. Why did they look no different from ordinary gods in Ji Nan's hands? After obtaining the 2 godhoods, Ji Nan did not have the intention to return to the god nation. Instead, he went to Meng Xian and Hua Kuei. Hua Kuei had already removed his golden armor, and he was a delicate-looking young man. He was originally a scholar, and the name Kuei was given to him. He did not expect to eventually embark on the path of joining the army by chance. Seeing that Ji Nan had arrived, he took the initiative and said, "Since you've already reached Dao integration, make a trip to the Grotto Void Heaven when you have the time. Yu Lian will arrange for us to meet." Huokue spoke first. He had already acknowledged Ji Yunan's position and viewed him as an existence at the Dao integration level. Ji Yunan nodded. At his current level, he could already tell the strength of these Dao integration level cultivators. Huokue and Meng Xian were both considered the stronger types of Dao integration level cultivators. According to their levels, they should be around level 13. Of course, it was still the same. At the Dao integration level, levels were often just a reference. Even Song Fei, who had no special precepts, could still defeat them, even though the probability was only 20 to 30%. Ji Yunan looked at Meng Xian and asked, "You're Lu Weiniang's mother?" Meng Xian's mouth twitched. She did not know how to reply and could only reply, "That's right." Without another word, Ji Yunan threw a punch at Meng Xian's face. Meng Xian's entire body instantly transformed into a shadow, causing Ji Yunan's punch to miss. However, her nomological laws were still damaged. "You're courting death." A cold snort sounded from the void. Terrifying dreamland power surged again and enveloped Ji Yunan's entire divine kingdom. This time, Meng Xian was personally attacking. Once she unleashed this attack, it would most likely be a true killing technique that could wipe out the consciousness of all living beings within the divine kingdom. However, a golden light slowly appeared and blocked the two of them. Huokue said with a resigned expression, "Ji Yunan, wait. Meng Xian won't seek revenge on you." Only then did Ji Yunan stop and look at Huokue in confusion. After confirming the relationship between Meng Xian and Lu Weiniang, he naturally had to strike first. However, Huokue said, "We Dao integration level cultivators have long since made an agreement. Dao integration is transcendence, and everything that happened before will be written off. Song Fei will also not pursue the matter of the pure magnificent heavens. Unless it's a death grudge." Ji Yunan had never heard of this kind of agreement between Dao integration level cultivators. However, he still asked, "What counts as a death grudge?" Chapter 474. Read. There was indeed such an agreement between Dao integration cultivators. It could be said that it was impossible for any Starlord to avoid conflict with others while advancing. However, for Starlords who were qualified to advance to Dao integration stage, offending a Dao integration cultivator was very likely to happen. For example, Shui Ren and Zhu Jiming had a certain conflict of laws, so their relationship had never been very good. His relationship with Yu Lian was quite good. This was also a tradition left behind in the past. Otherwise, if he only offended people without allies, he might be assassinated during his advancement. In order to protect the latecomers, there was such an agreement between Dao integration cultivators. Once someone advanced to Dao integration stage, their previous grievances would no longer be counted. Of course, Song Fei had directly caused Elder Zi Luo's cultivation level to drop, causing him to be unable to make a comeback for tens of thousands of years. That's indeed the case. Yu Lian and Ji Yunan sat opposite each other and confirmed Huokue's words. This was not the grotto void heaven. Yu Lian had personally come to meet Ji Yunan. From her words, it seemed like she wanted to draw Ji Yunan to her side. The Dao integration cultivators of the All Heavens were indeed not as clear-cut as the two neighboring god systems, but there were still factions. For example, Ju Po and Song Fei were close, while Song Fei and Qin Guan were on good terms. They could be said to be a faction. Because of his relationship with the Heavenly God Association and Shui Ren, Ji Yunan had always been closer to Yu Lian. It was normal for Yu Lian to draw him to her side immediately. In other words, Song Fei and Immortal Dream won't cause trouble for me because of old grudges. Yes and no, Yu Lian said with a faint smile. An agreement is just an agreement. If one day you don't have Dao integration power, they most likely won't let you off. Ji Yunan nodded. To put it bluntly, the so-called agreement was just to give everyone a way out. There was no need to fight to the death. It was quite difficult for a Dao integration cultivator to kill an opponent of the same level. How could he explain to his subordinates if his disciples and children died at the hands of the other party? Since it was difficult to explain, he might as well make an agreement. As for when he needed to fight, he could completely ignore the agreement. Dream Immortal has just returned, and she still needs to deal with the matters of her old subordinates. After you broke through, Zi Luo's injuries stabilized. Yu Lian continued, once they've settled their own affairs, I'll gather everyone to meet again. The time will be set for a month from now. Sure. Ji Yunan had no objections and nodded. Yu Lian looked deeply into Ji Yunan's eyes again. This time, we have 3 more Dao integration stage cultivators, but 2 of them are old members. You're the only newcomer. There are some things that I will tell you when the time comes. Ji Yunan glanced at her. It was clear that there was something hidden in her words. However, since Yu Lian had no intention of telling him now, he would wait for a month. In any case, it wouldn't be something like the world is about to be destroyed, and Dao integration stage cultivators need to take turns to protect it, or foreign enemies are invading, and Dao integration stage cultivators need to take turns to guard the borders. Seeing that Song Fei still had the time to wage war against the Pantheon world, he knew that this was not the case. After the 2 of them came to an agreement, Yu Lian had no intention of staying any longer and quickly disappeared. It was already 2 days after Ji Yunan had broken through. Everything had been settled, and the Pantheon world had all retreated. The overall war situation had entered a slump. The various worlds had no idea what the Pantheon world was thinking, and they didn't have the time to care about it now, because they were all busy welcoming the arrival of a new Dao integration stage cultivator. Before this, although Ji Yunan's reputation was great, it had always been mixed. Now, however, it had become one-sided praise. No one dared to mention comments like unstable foundation, narrow-minded, unscrupulous, and so on. Since Ji Yunan's debut, all of his classic battles had been turned into case studies for the various worlds to analyze. Then, people realized, there was nothing to analyze. This was a guy who had debuted less than 100 years ago and had risen to Dao integration like a rocket. What was there to analyze? Favored by fate? No. Gifted prodigy? Ridiculously strange. Unswerving determination? No one could tell. Heaven rewarded the diligent. Non-existent. Late bloomers. Late my *SS. Tears streamed down the faces of the analysts from the major forces. In the past, they could still use too fast advancement and unstable foundation as an excuse, but now, they really didn't know what to say. Until a rumor spread that Ji Yunan was not a mortal, but the reincarnation of an ancient heretic god from the Pantheon world. It was also because of this that the lords were trying their best to kill him. As soon as this news came out, it was immediately recognized by a large number of analysts. The reincarnation of a mighty figure. They finally found a reason. In order to make the story sound more reasonable, they had put in a lot of effort. As the heretic god theory spread and was recognized by more and more people, more and more information about Ji Yunan's experiences were dug up, and a new problem arose. How did a mighty figure from the Pantheon world reincarnate into the various worlds? Due to the existence of the dimension wall between the 2 realms, it could be said that apart from the spacetime crystal core, there was no other way to communicate. Reincarnation was even more unimaginable. As a result, another wave of research on cross-world reincarnation was triggered. Many people wanted to use this method to cross over, but this was another matter altogether. Ji Yunan himself did not care about the discussions outside. He never cared about the opinions of others. Ji Yunan was sitting in his own god kingdom, watching as Red Tail brought in batch after batch of names. They were all cultivators who had applied to join the God Kingdom. Because Ji Yunan had forbidden outsiders from entering the astral world, after a few rounds of killings, no one dared to trespass anymore. All of them submitted their applications obediently. Those who could be chosen by Red Tail were not ordinary people. In fact, many of them were astral lords. Joining the astral world of a convergent was definitely not a bad thing for astral lords. It would not be embarrassing to say it out loud. Instead, they would feel honored. In fact, most minor astral lords lived in the convergence astral world in real life, using it as their usual residence. Red Tail looked slightly worried. Sir, if we don't let these people in, I'm afraid, there's nothing to worry about. Make them all scram. My astral world doesn't need outsiders. Ji Yunan waved his hand and said bluntly, after the second-class advancement, The God Kingdom's nomological enhancements were far less powerful than the first-class advancement. Moreover, the arrangements that Ji Yunan had to make in the God Kingdom, or rather, the arrangements that he had to carry out in there, required him to have full control over the God Kingdom. There was no room for these outsiders. Instead of chasing them away, he might as well not let them in. Chapter 475. Read. When the news of Ji Yunan changing the name of his astral boundary spread, those who were close to him didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Does he really not want anyone to interfere with his astral boundary? Shui Ren sat calmly in front of Elder Zi Luo, laughing as he talked about matters related to Ji Yunan. He had once been known as the person closest to Tao integration, but now, he was still the person closest to Tao integration. The only difference was that someone had flown over his head. However, Shui Ren didn't mind this awkward situation at all. At the very least, he didn't show any signs of it on his face. Old man Zi Luo was still smiling, but his complexion was a lot better than before. His nomological laws were very special, and they were related to organizations. His method of self-improvement was to develop his own forces. It could be said that the Heavenly God Society was his main foundation. If Shui Ren, a pillar of the Heavenly God Society, advanced to the Tao integration level, he would be able to completely heal Elder Zi Luo's injuries and advance further. In the end, Ji Yunan wasn't a die-hard fan of the Heavenly God Society, so his advancement didn't help Elder Zi Luo as much as he had imagined. Ji Yunan always has his own intentions, and others can't see through him, Elder Zi Luo said with a smile. Shui Ren nodded. Everyone has their own path. Elder Zi Luo looked at Shui Ren with a profound gaze. Once you take this path, you won't be able to turn back. Now that my injuries have stabilized, you don't need to worry. Even if he wasn't a die-hard fan of the Heavenly God Society, Ji Yunan's advancement had extended Elder Zi Luo's life. The 10-year limit no longer existed, and he could afford to wait. Everyone could see that Shui Ren would advance within 100 years, and when that time came, Elder Zi Luo would officially return. Thus, the Tao integration practitioners already regarded him as a member of the Tao Integration Club. Shui Ren said expressionlessly, "We can't wait any longer. I have a premonition that what Austin said might be possible." Are you saying that Ji Yunan will cause the world to collapse? Elder Zi Luo shook his head. Even if you have a premonition, you won't be able to convince others. The Lord of the Stars here was not like those gods. The Tao integration practitioners had relied on their own cultivation to get to where they were today, not the will of the masses. That was why they did not believe in any legends at all. They only believed in themselves, they had absolute confidence in themselves. Even existences of the same level would find it difficult to completely destroy themselves, let alone everyone else. Of course, Shui Ren understood this, but it didn't mean that he would give up. That's exactly why I need to hurry up. Old man Zi Luo looked at him for a long time. In the end, he sighed softly and said, "All right then. I have a secret technique that I created myself. No one else in this world knows how to use it. It can help you hide until the crucial moment." "Thank you." Ji Yunan didn't care about what the others were doing. He was busy fiddling with something new in his divine kingdom. 2 sparkling guard hoods floated in front of him. Ji Yunan was using his own law of shadows to wash away the god's imprint bit by bit. These 2 quintessences were naturally the quintessences fragments of the 2 overgods, Austin and Koche Sai, that Ji Yunan had intercepted from their clones. If a godhead of this level could be cleansed, it would undoubtedly become a priceless treasure. More importantly, if he could control 2 overgod guardhoods, even if they were just fragments, it would be of great help to Ji Yunan's next move. After a player's second profession advancement, the key to improving himself was sin points. Points became a support. This had always been the case. It was just that in the Divine Kingdom stage, points were necessary to upgrade the evil god's temple, which was why they were especially important. The method of killing gods was still effective, but the problem was, there weren't enough gods to kill. There were probably no more than 1,000 gods in the entire pantheon world. Among them, there were many low-level gods with few followers. High-level gods made up a very small proportion. Ji Yunan had killed many high-level gods just to advance to level 10. The remaining gods were definitely not enough for him to kill to level 15. For example, to advance to level 12, he needed 200,000 sin points. There was a gap of 70,000. Therefore, if he wanted to continue earning sin points, he had to find a long-term way. The method provided by the game was very simple: nurture a blasphemer. What was a blasphemer? Simply put, it was a living creature that had fallen from the gods' followers and abandoned their faith. Blasphemy was a sin, and it was undoubtedly a greater sin for a blasphemer to do it. Therefore, the ultimate goal of nurturing a blasphemer was to have him kill the gods he originally believed in. It was also because of this ultimate goal that players could only use this method to earn sin points after their second profession advancement. After all, for a blasphemer to kill a god, it meant that the blasphemer had to be nurtured into a new god. This could only be done after their second profession advancement. For example, Ji Nan had obtained a water divinity in his early years and placed it on Lan Sai. Until now, Lan Sai could no longer be considered a true god. Strictly speaking, Lan Sai was also a blasphemer, but if he counted on her to kill Lorenza, Ji Nan would rather complete the quest himself. Ji Nan could use his own power to nurture a blasphemer, but this way, the aura of an evil god could not be hidden and would be easily discovered. It was a method of killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. The best way was to provide a high-level divinity to the blasphemers so that they could grow quickly and reach a level where they could kill a god. The shadow power was still boiling, constantly washing away the white and purple shards of the divinity in the air. The white shard from Austin was still unmoved, as if it was completely unaffected by the shadow power, but the nightmare divinity was already on the verge of collapse. Purely in terms of laws, Ji Nan was still a level 11. It was still a little difficult for him to cleanse Austin's divinity. On the other hand, the level 13 Lord of Nightmares, Kosisi, was only a support in battle. This time, the divinity that was separated was very small, and the internal laws were about to be completely cleansed. Let's cleanse Kosisi's first one first. I'll leave the level 15 divinity for later. Ji Nan had originally only wanted to give it a try. Seeing the situation, he immediately made a decision. As long as he had a Lord God's divinity in hand, he would have a way to nurture the first blasphemer. After that, when the blasphemy was completed, he would retrieve the divinity. Call Red Tail over. Ji Nan's voice came from the evil god's temple, and was quickly conveyed by Yang Xiaoxiao to Red Tail. My lord. Red Tail quickly walked in. Recently, there was no need to prepare for war, and she was also idle. She actually looked a little stout. You'll be busy again in the future. Ji Nan patted her shoulder. The White Mist is going to build a new branch. What branch? Chapter 476. Read. The Pantheon World. Redtail suddenly felt dizzy. She could not imagine that this person would have the idea of setting up a branch in the Pantheon World when the war was at a stalemate. Ji Nan nodded. Don't worry, the war is coming to an end. I'll write another handbook in 2 days to have both sides completely cease fire. Redtail could not help but ask curiously, what handbook? The God's Hunting Handbook. As the author of the Hunting God Handbook, Ji Nan naturally knew which key points were worth paying attention to, and where there were loopholes that could be discovered by the gods in advance. As long as the difficulty of hunting God increased, and the cost and profit returned to a normal ratio, the hunting God operation would no longer be so crazy, and would definitely become a small-scale operation. The corner of Redtail's mouth twitched, and she hesitated. But, if my lord wants to start another war in the future, just write another Hunting God Handbook version 2.0. Ji Nan pursed his lips, and looked at Redtail. You talk a lot today, don't you want to go to the Pantheon World? Not really. Redtail said speechlessly. She had been bored out of her mind these days, and could not wait to have something to do. Going to the Pantheon World was a little sudden. However, as Ji Nan's most trusted subordinate, Redtail quickly adjusted her mentality, and said with a serious expression, I understand. May I know the main purpose of setting up this branch? To collect information, especially about the major primary planes. Ji Nan thought for a moment, and said, I need you to help me find some good seedlings. They must be people who originally believed in the gods, but their faith has collapsed. What if their faith is still firm? Then think of a way to make them fall. Ji Yunan replied without raising his head, Lan Saihui will go with you. She'll be a good guide. Bring Xie Yun and the other two along too. They'll be our fighters. The so-called Xie Yun and the other two referred to Xie Yun, and Tianxing, and Liang Ruxin. Although Ji Yunan's player army was small in number, they were all elites, especially Xie Yun and the other two, who had already advanced to grade 5. To mortals, rank 5 was equivalent to a star lord or a god. Xie Yun and Tianxing had, to a certain extent, made use of the uniqueness of their roots. Liang Ruxin, on the other hand, had relied entirely on his own comprehension ability. With a clear direction in mind, he was able to make rapid progress. Under Ji Yunan's arrangement, almost all the high-end forces in the Divine Kingdom were mobilized. Red Tail knew that this meant that Ji Yunan's next operation would be focused on the Pantheon world. He hurriedly replied, Yes, I'll depart today. The arrangements in the Pantheon world were already underway, but building an intelligence organization from scratch was not something that could be done overnight. Fortunately, he had Red Tail, an experienced organizer, and a group of powerful subordinates to rely on, so the progress was quite fast. As for Ji Yunan, he had already completed his second transition and could be said to truly have the ability to protect himself. He no longer had to rush to level up like he did in the past, and he could stop occasionally to enjoy life. For example, 2 games of black cards. This game is very simple, said Yu Lian, who had defeated Ji Yunan for the first time on the 3rd day. Ji Yunan did not mind. He smiled and said, Why don't you try beating me 3 times in a row? After all, black cards was a card game with limited rules. For the truly top-notch experts, their chances of winning against each other were basically around 50%. The true deciding factor was still luck. However, compared to Sylvia in the past, Yu Lian, who was in the form of a Taoist nun, was already considered to be extraordinarily talented. The speed of her improvement was simply astounding. After leaving the Divine Kingdom, Ji Yunan ran to the Grotto Void Heaven to play cards with Yu Lian. In any case, he had nothing better to do recently. All he could do was wait for the Tao Fusing Conference in the Grotto Void Heaven to convene, so he might as well come early and wait. He had already made arrangements in the Divine Kingdom. Once Red Tail had gathered enough people, he could automatically start a screening mechanism to select the one who was ultimately qualified to inherit the Godhead fragment. After 2 consecutive defeats, Yu Lian calmly pushed away the cards and said in a serious manner, Zhu Jiming said he wanted to have a chat with you. Shall we meet him first? A Trenza. On this war-torn continent, a large number of civilians were displaced. There were also a large number of believers who could not find protection in the chaos of war. In the end, they lost their faith and became non-believers. Vivian was such a young girl. She had believed in the goddess of radiance since she was a child. Even though she was just a god with a weak divine power, Vivian had always believed that gods could not be distinguished by the strength of their divine power. There was justice in the world, and power was definitely not the truth. Until one day, when the war came, Vivian finally understood what was the truth. On that day, the town where the young girl lived was suddenly attacked. The evil invaders destroyed her home and slaughtered her relatives. Originally, the young girl thought that she was also going to die. Fortunately, a god with a mid-level divine power appeared. However, he was unable to protect everyone and could only selectively protect some people. Therefore, the believers of this god naturally became the first batch of protection targets. Vivian was lucky enough to be chosen as the second batch. However, her brother was not so lucky. Seeing her brother die tragically under the butcher knife of the enemy with her own eyes, the devout young girl finally understood a principle. First there must be power, then there must be justice. And now, after 2 months of experience in the flames of war, Vivian had grown from a young girl to a mature female mercenary. Her fair skin had become dark. She frequently went in and out of taverns. She burned the priest's robe that she had yearned for in her youth and put on a tight trench coat. Her hands were already stained with blood. She had even completely forgotten about divine arts. Now, she only knew how to kill people with a scimitar. She became strong, brave, and even cold, like a rose full of thorns. Only in the dead of night would she remember the helplessness of the death of her loved ones, so she longed for power more and more. Until one day, a voice inexplicably sounded in her ear. Do you want power? Do you want to protect everything that you have today? Do you want to obtain eternal life? This voice seemed to be torturing Vivian's soul. She could not go against her heart. Of course I want it. Power. Give me more power. When this thought fell, Vivian felt the scene in front of her become dark, and her consciousness seemed to fall into a state of drowsiness. When she woke up again, the young girl carefully opened her eyes and found that she was in a jungle. Not far away, she could see some signs of human habitation and a small sign. However, the style of the houses here was very strange. It seemed to be different from any civilization. Even the words on the sign on the side were in a strange square font. What is written on it? Vivian looked at the sign curiously. Newcomer? There are annotations in the common language next to it. A voice sounded next to Vivian. It was a tall woman who was walking slowly. Vivian quickly turned her head and looked. Sure enough, she saw familiar handwriting. It clearly said, Chapter 477. Read. Quest location, Ghost Sea. Quest objective, assist Sky City's floating island forces in defeating the invading enemies. Quest difficulty, 3-star. When the details of the quest were revealed, the tall blonde Nancy frowned. It's a 3-star quest. Vivian, you won't be coming with us this time. Under normal circumstances, a 3-star quest required at least 3 Tier 3 members to have a higher chance of completing it. Nancy's party could provide 3 Tier 3 members, but if they brought Vivian along, they might not have the spare energy to take care of her. Big sis Nancy, I can do it. Vivian insisted. I'm already a Tier 2 mercenary. Adam sometimes loses to me when he doesn't use the power of law. The blue-haired youth beside her said in dissatisfaction, That's my mistake. And I clearly lost to you once. Before Adam could finish, Vivian glared at him, and his voice became softer and softer. It had been nearly a month since Vivian arrived in this mysterious space. She had a basic understanding of the rules here, and her strength had also grown rapidly. In just a month, she had grown from an ordinary mercenary who only knew some fighting techniques to a Tier 2 powerhouse. While this was partly due to the help provided by the Lord Space, Vivian's own efforts and talent were also inseparable. Nancy stared at her for a while before finally nodding. All right, if you insist. But you have to promise to follow all instructions. Yes. Vivian said excitedly. Ghost Sea. Nancy led Vivian, Adam, and the other Tier 3 member of the party, Jonathan, who was an expert with the bow and arrow. The party of 4 advanced quickly. The quest requires us to assist Sky City's floating island forces in battle, but we have to understand the situation first. We have to figure out who our enemies are and who our friends are, Nancy said calmly, looking like a big sister. In the past, a party that acted rashly was directly treated as spies and executed by friendly forces. Afraid that the party members would be careless, Nancy added, If you die in the Lord Space, you're really dead. Got it, big sister. You've said this almost 20 times already. Adam patted the heavy sword at his waist and adjusted to a comfortable position before moving forward. Also, no one who died in the God realm returned. Who knows if they died or returned? The so-called return, in the eyes of the crowd, was naturally referring to the world of gods, which was what they believed to be the primary plane. Then you can give it a try. Nancy glared at Adam and said snappily. Vivian stood at the side and exchanged glances with the archer Jonathan. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and chuckle. The first time she saw Sister Nancy and Adam bickering, she thought they were going to quarrel. Later, it was Jonathan who told her that the two of them came from the same continent and entered the god space at almost the same time. They were the first to support each other until today, and their relationship was so good that they could sleep together. After the two of them finished bickering, Vivian interrupted curiously, Say, do you think the Lord God space was really built by a Lord God? It was the boring part of the journey, so the three of them did not mind chatting with Vivian for a while. Adam was the first to say, Most likely. No matter which god built it, an ordinary god would not dare to hang the name of a Lord God. When talking about the gods, Adam did not have the slightest hint of respect. Instead, there was a hint of mockery in his words. In the past, Vivian would probably have been very dissatisfied with this attitude, but now, not only did she not feel disgusted, she even felt a little pleased. The God that she had once believed in devoutly did not protect her in the face of death, so what was the point of her devoutness? On the contrary, Adam's words gave Vivian the strange pleasure of entering a forbidden territory and tasting the forbidden fruit. Observer body number 29 is currently performing well. Within the white fog, a man in a white work uniform withdrew his gaze from the action record of number 29 and wrote down his evaluation. Number 29, is it that girl called Vivian? The man heard a voice coming from behind him and quickly turned around, only to see that Redtail was already standing there at some point. Yes, the man said respectfully. Sir, she was personally brought back by you. Redtail nodded. When she was in the world of gods, she had set up the White Fog branch, and at the same time, she had selected talents from the various main planes, especially those who had already lost their faith. The goal of still believing in the gods required the White Fog to make arrangements there and destroy their faith one by one. On the other hand, people like Vivian who had lost their faith were very suitable for deep training, so she was directly brought back to the heavenly worlds and arranged to enter the Lord God space that Ji Yunan had personally built. As for why it was necessary to build a Lord God space, even the name was personally given by Ji Yunan, so of course Redtail could not object. Redtail nodded, and after carefully checking Vivian's action record, he immediately said, "Let Adam die in this mission, he can talk to Vivian before he dies." The man in the work uniform quickly agreed, but then said, "It's just that. Number 29's blasphemy value is only rated C, we need Adam's existence to cultivate this quality of the observer body." However, Redtail insisted, "Just arrange for a newcomer to join the team. According to your original training method, it's too slow. Vivian's potential is greater than you think." The matter of using the Lord God space to cultivate blasphemers was naturally handled by Redtail and the others. Ever since Ji Yunan finished building the Lord God space, he did not pay attention to the matters there. He stayed in the Grotto Void Heaven and met with the Dao integration cultivators who came to visit one after another. Even Song Fei was no exception. This top powerhouse who was in charge of Shi Daotian showed a kind smile in front of Ji Yunan for the first time, and even specifically told him not to take the past to heart. Since he had already advanced to Dao integration, then according to the agreement, everything from before would be written off even though before Ji Yunan had actually advanced, he was the one who tried to kill Ji Yunan with all his might. Of course, Ji Yunan did not take this to heart. In any case, if they wanted to fall out with each other, these Dao integration cultivators could do so at any time, so the agreement was just empty talk. Apart from Elder Zi Luo and Immortal Dream, Ji Yunan met all the original 13 heavens of the heavenly worlds. The first one he met was Zhu Jiming. This somewhat talkative martial soldier Star Lord did not provide much help to Ji Yunan, and he only came to chat. In fact, most of the people were just chatting. After all, they did not have much interaction with Ji Yunan. The Dao integration cultivators that Ji Yunan had really come into contact with were Song Fei, Lu Wen, Elder Zi Luo, and so on. Chapter 478. Read. There was one person in the 13 skies. Ji Yunan had heard of his name a long time ago, but he had never seen him in person. This person was the Star Lord of the 9 Spirits Heaven, Ju Po. Ju Po was one of the oldest Dao fusing cultivators in the universe. He was from almost the same generation as Elder Zi Luo. Ever since he reached Dao fusing, he had always been the most mysterious Dao fusing cultivators. How mysterious was he? It could be said that there were definitely no more than 30 people in the universe who knew what Ju Po looked like, including the various Dao fusing cultivators. Ji Yunan was fortunate enough to be another person who had seen Ju Po's appearance. However, after seeing Ju Po, he felt that there was really nothing special about him. It was as if he had not seen him at all. He had the face of an ordinary middle-aged man who was always smiling. He did not have the aura of a mysterious big boss like in novels at all. Based on the limitless number of human appearances, there might be hundreds of people who looked exactly like him in the various major dimensions. Ji Yunan, I've wanted to meet you for a long time, Ju Po said to Ji Yunan with a smile. Ji Yunan glanced at him and said, I heard that you're in cahoots with Song Fei? Back when Song Fei reached Dao fusing, Ju Po had played a part in it. If it wasn't for his help, Song Fei definitely wouldn't have been able to kill Elder Zi Luo. Ju Po shook his head and said, you should say that I invested in him. Isn't that the same? Ji Yunan shrugged. If Song Fei died, you wouldn't be able to get a return on your investment. Wouldn't you help him? Towards these words, Ju Po laughed. There are exceptions. For example, I invested in a new target, and this new target's return will be higher. Ji Yunan finally nodded in understanding. So you want to invest in me? Then what resources do you have to invest in me? I can help you kill gods, Ju Po said without changing his expression. Gods. A new round of Dao fusing cultivators finally began. This time, there were a total of 16 people present. The original 13 skies led by Yu Lian, as well as Ji Yunan, Elder Zi Luo, and Immortal Dream. With the return of 2 old comrades and the advancement of a newcomer, 13 days became 16 days. If nothing unexpected happened, from this day onwards, the name 16 Heavens would be known by the world, and it would be used to describe this group of top-notch experts. These 16 Heavens were Paradise Heaven, God Emperor Heaven, 9 Soul Heaven, and this world is already full heaven. 16 Dao integration cultivators gathered in the Dongshu Heaven. This was the first time Ji Yunan had seen so many Dao integration cultivators appear in the same place at the same time, even though he had seen all of them before. Yu Lian naturally sat at the head of the table. Below her were Ju Po and a young man with a solemn expression. He was the Star Lord of Divine Emperor Heaven, Zhao Renwang. In the history of the Myriad Heavens world, the structure of the Myriad Heavens world wasn't like this in ancient times. Instead, it was divided into heaven, earth, and mortal realms. The 3 realms were not isolated from each other, so the ancient people could travel freely in the 3 realms. After a great change in the world, the 3 realms completely collapsed and split into countless planes of various sizes. However, the most essential parts of the 3 realms were preserved and managed by the 3 sages of that time. Until now, they were still at the Dao integration level. The Heaven realm had the direct descendants of Orthodox Taoism, which was the current Paradise Heaven. The Earth realm had lost the power of reincarnation in the Netherworld, but it was able to become a normal plane, which was the current 9 Soul Heaven. The mortal realm had evolved over thousands of years, and there were many almighty human beings, which was the current God Emperor Heaven. This was the origin of the 3 most ancient astral realms, Paradise Heaven, Divine Emperor Heaven, and 9 Soul Heaven. Of course, the current masters of these 3 astral realms were no longer the 3 sages of the past. Even Ju Po, who was the oldest, was not the first master of the 9 Soul Heaven. However, unlike the other 2 realms, Ju Po had snatched the core of the Earth realm from the hands of the previous sage when he died, and then changed its name to the 9 Soul Heaven. Now, when people talked about the 9 Soul Heaven, the core topic was still its origin. This showed how powerful this move was. Ji Yunan retracted his gaze from Ju Po and looked at Yu Lian and Zhao Renwang. These 2 had inherited the astral realms from their ancestors for many generations. The Paradise Heaven was the origin of Taoism, and it had always been said that it ruled over all realms. Therefore, whenever a new Dao integration cultivator appeared, the Paradise Heaven would host the meeting. The Divine Emperor Heaven was more interesting. Every Star Lord of this astral realm would change their name to Human King. The only difference was that their surnames were different. Compared to the Paradise Heaven's attitude of meddling in everything, the Divine Emperor Heaven was more like a self-enclosed astral realm. It did not completely seal itself off from the outside world like Ji Yunan. However, if one wanted to join the Divine Emperor Heaven, they had to go through a strict examination, and it was more through internal reproduction. Simply put, the main task of every generation's king was to protect their own astral realm, so that the human race's tinder could burn forever in the Divine Emperor Heaven. As for what happened outside, that had nothing to do with them. I called everyone here this time because a new Dao integration cultivator has appeared. Zi Luo and Mengxian are old friends, and I'm sure everyone has met Ji Yunan. Yu Lian did not put on airs and spoke in the most straightforward manner. Deep down, She knew that the paradise heaven ruled over all realms was just a name. If there was really a conflict of interest, no one would care about it at all. Only when something like this needed to be hosted would everyone remember that there was such a thing. According to convention, Yu Lian stood up and said to Ji Yunan, I need you to offer incense to the seniors. Then, the seniors. Forget it. I reckon you won't be happy. Let's get down to business. Halfway through her sentence, Yu Lian thought that there was no need to ask. She simply moved on to the next step of the procedure. When they got down to business, Yu Lian's expression became even more serious. She stared at Ji Yunan and said, We Dao integration cultivators can enjoy freedom in the world, but we also have to bear the heavy responsibility of the world. What do you mean? Do we really need to save the world? Ji Yunan could not help but ask as he recalled some of his previous criticisms. Not really. Yu Lian was somewhat speechless. Maintaining the normal operation of all the realms and nurturing more and more powerful celestial lords is our responsibility. Nurturing celestial lords was directly ignored by Ji Yunan. The first sentence made him frown slightly. The operation of all the realms and realms is maintained by Dao integration cultivators? Strictly speaking, yes. Yu Lian nodded. When you first became a celestial lord and were looking for your own astral realm, you should have been to a place called the inner world. She paused for a moment before continuing. In a sense, the inner world does not exist. It is a control center that we have created by gathering everyone's power. Ji Yunan's mind suddenly became clear. All the questions he had about entering and exiting the inner world back then had been answered at this moment. No wonder the inner world's existence was so strange. It was as if it was specially made to facilitate celestial lords in finding astral realms. No wonder the world of gods, which was similar in nature to the paradise heaven, had never heard of a similar product. No wonder the rules of the inner world appeared rigid and sluggish. It turned out that it was a man-made product. What exactly do we need to do? Ji Yunan could not help but be curious.